Just like, I'm fine, it's really not that big a deal.
I emailed it to you and to Abby Ennis.
You did?
Yeah.
So that has a awesome job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started with our meeting. We can see you, Carissa, so we'll go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and the invocation tonight will be offered by Paul James.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, want to welcome everyone to our school board meeting. This is the regularly scheduled school board meeting, August 10th, 2022. We'll do a roll call. Paul Jenkins. We need, oh.
Prayer.
No, I'm
fine if we don't.
Yeah, I think we do need a prayer. So, go ahead, Paul.
Our Father in heaven, as we gather together this evening
As a free country and the opportunity we have to participate together, we give thanks to Thee. We ask Thy guidance this evening that we will be able to make wise and prudent decisions, that we might implore Thee for the psalm, for the wisdom of Solomon, and the courage to make right choices like Daniel. And for Thy guidance this evening, we humbly pray and give thanks in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Paul. We'll now call this meeting to order officially and do a roll call. Paul Jenkins.
Present.
Greg Calder.
Here.
Krista Coates.
Here.
Randy Smith.
Here.
And I, Chad Danson, here. I'd like to welcome any visitors or anyone representing anyone from our district or patrons from our district. Appreciate you being here with us tonight. We are requesting a motion to amend the agenda. A board member can move that the board, pursuant to Idaho Code 742044, amend the agenda for this meeting as follows: to add bus bids to the consent calendar and to add surplus property appraisals and purchase agreement and sale of the property at 97th North. So those items would show on the agenda separately from the consent calendar, and to add the Hit Road property purchase agreement under the title surplus property appraisals and purchase agreements. These requests were received today and are time sensitive. I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
I move to amend the agenda as you indicated.
Okay, moved by Greg Calder, second by Randy Smith. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Chairman Dance, if I may. There's another item that we neglected to include, because it's now after the beginning of the meeting, the board cannot take action on it, but if we could have a discussion about employee A 2022's request to be released from contract as item 10E. Again, we won't ask for any action by the board because it is after the start of the meeting, but we could at least discuss that with the board and see if there's any concerns. I apologize.
That number again,
Employee at 2022A, and I apologize we didn't get that to you in time for the earlier motion.
That is the employee we discussed in the section.
yes. So if no action is taken on it, then how is it resolved?
So we'll just ask if there are concerns from the board with the recommendation we made in executive session, and so we'll ask for that, and if there's no concerns from the board, then we'll proceed, and then we'll take a final action on it in our special meeting in 3 weeks.
Okay, great, thank you, Scott. Okay, now we'll entertain a motion to amend the agenda as discussed. I think it was amended, I think the motion by Greg Calder, seconded by Randy.
So that motion was approved, so I would ask the board for a second motion to add this item as well.
Okay,
So I'll go ahead and move that we add item E under 10 for
Employee A 2022.
oh, that's right, okay, this is a second motion.
Yeah.
We'll second that, Randy Smith seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries.
Thank you.
Now we need a motion to approve the amended agenda.
so move.
Moved by Greg Calder,
Second.
second by Krista Coates. All in favor? Aye. Motion,
Aye.
motion carries. Okay, so there's a number of items on the consent calendar. If any board member would like to remove any item from the consent calendar to the regular agenda, that can be accomplished. And there is one that I would like to have a discussion on, Scott, and that's the school resource officer contract.
Okay.
So if we could move that off the consent calendar, and there's just a minor thing that I wanted to get cleared up. Any other items that any board members would like removed from the consent calendar and put on the regular agenda? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I so move.
Moved by Randy Smith,
Second.
second by Greg Calder. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay, for public input, pursuant to board policy number 4105, public participation in board meetings, public input shall be held to a maximum of 1 hour and will provide an opportunity for any board member, administrator, staff member, student, or patron to raise issues of interest. The board will receive such input without comment except to ask germane questions of those speaking. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and we'll do our best to time that and keep to that. The board will take no action relative to any items during the meeting unless on the agenda, but may direct the superintendent to consider such items at a subsequent meeting. So, do we have anyone signed up? No one has signed up to speak, so we don't have any public input at this time. All right, okay, thank you.
Chad, what is your thought about when we're gonna talk about the school resource concern? Is that a?
I'd say do it under, under finance and operations. That's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just make it out of D or something
Yeah.
like that. Okay.
So where would that be?
Why don't we do it why don't we do it after the bus routes, if that's okay? Transition on discussion.
Okay,
Thanks.
all right, here, okay. All right, at this time, we'll invite Guy Wainsgard to present fee increase requests.
So we seem to have this conversation almost monthly now, that we're trying to get our fees in line and all appropriate. So the athletic directors would like to increase the spectator athletic season passes from $80 to $85, and the spectator athletic single punch pass from $4 to $5. Both of these are in excess of the 5% that is allowed, so we have advertised in the newspaper as required by statute, and we've now asked for fee hearings for anybody to comment prior to the board taking action on this request.
I was wondering, this is, what is the punch pass? You buy a pass and every time they click it, it costs you that much money?
Yeah, I'm gonna look to keep
You
this.
buy a pass for the number of punches on it, you buy 20 punches and pay for it all in advance and take that to the gate and punch it.
Have we ever had a family price?
We did a few years ago,
Yes.
I'm not sure where.
I don't remember.
Doug,
Yeah.
you know if we're doing
So Wendy Johnson at Hillcrest and Tyler Johnson at Bonneville tried to create like a District 93 family pass, but I think the way that they created it, it was like cost prohibitive. So it was like $380, but then that got you into every game in the whole district if you chose to purchase that. And I don't know if we sold any of them, but they had that as an option when Wendy first came on board. But we've got a little bit of a discussion going on how we can improve reward some of our families to get more kids to games. to allow younger siblings to be there without making it cost an arm and a leg for our patrons. So we're looking at that right now, but I don't know.
Well, there's a new trend about dancing. And these little tiny kids are 5 years old and they dance, and they hire a dance teacher, and then they charge everybody to go to recitals. I
It's not
refuse to pay. It
It's
just
not
doesn't
new.
make any sense. I think.
It's not new, it's been going on for years. It's been going on for the last 20 years. It's not new. It's how the high school makes money to,
But I think, when I
big
go,
kids dance.
a lot of the times the stadiums are empty. I'd love to see people feel like they can afford to bring their families. So if you did a 3-factor on the single rate for the season and charged $240 or something, one of the adults would have to attend, something like that. I don't know. I'd like to see somebody look into that.
Makes sense to me, we gotta look at that.
How does High Country Conference, because they set the rate for the gate, right?
Yeah, they do, so they set a rate each year, and I know it was raised 4 or 5 years ago. Doug, you
Just
know,
raised this
It
year.
was raised this year again.
Been raised for, I don't think, for
It
12.
was raised when I was on the High Country Conference.
6 was raised to 6.
Yeah.
Is it 7?
Was it
Now it's
7
at
now?
7.
Yeah.
So the High Country Conference sets the prices for regular season,
That's what's right.
so every team in the conference follows that. So it's consistent at every village, go to every playing
And
area.
they don't have a family?
They don't, they just dictate, general admission, child admission, student admission, and then senior citizen admission. And then the district can choose to do anything additional about that.
But they'd only be good in our district?
Yes, so our punch passes and our season tickets are, typically a season ticket is $85 for one person to any game at that school. We haven't had a district pass. I don't think we've ever sold a district pass. We had them at one time, but they were usually given to people in the community for various supports that they provided to the district.
The district employees,
Yeah, and those weren't given to district employees, but
no,
dis-
district employees.
yeah.
Okay.
So, tonight's presentation relates to these 2 fee increases,
Yes.
and we're required to have an open public hearing on
Yes.
those fee increases. So if there's anyone that would like to provide public input on those fee increases, you're welcome to do so now. Okay, hearing none, we will ask for a motion to approve the fee increases.
I would so move.
Moved by Paul Jenkins to approve the fee increases.
Second?
Second by Greg Calder. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
I think
Thanks, Guy.
you may still be presenting your
You're
bus
still
routes.
up there, guys, so now you're presenting
Bus routes.
bus routes, and when I looked at that on my
One accountant creates.
board, how many speaking pages was it, 103?
It was, yes.
Quite a few.
It took 3
I
years.
admit, I did not go through it.
Yes. So as required by Idaho statute, each year Pam and her team put together the routes, and so that is before you tonight for approval.
Chairman Dan, if I may, I think just key thing to know is there's no changes to the safety routes. That's typically what these are, maybe somewhat more contentious is if we're significantly altering routes and there's no significant alterations or changes to the routes from last year.
Okay, great, thank you. And no action, there is action required on that. We'll ask for a motion to approve the bus routes as presented.
So
Moved by Greg Calder,
Second.
second.
A second.
I'll give it to Carissa, second by Carissa.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now, on that resource officer contract, the only question I had on that, Scott, and maybe it's been corrected, but I just wanted to understand which schools are covered by resource officers, number one. Secondly, in the document, it says 5, but then it has the number 6 in parentheses. So I don't know if that's a typo or what should it be?
It should be 6.
It should be 6.
Yeah.
So we'll need to look at that document. In 3 or 4 places it was inconsistent there. Got it.
Yeah, we can update.
Thank you for your careful review of that, Chairman Dan. So, yeah, so all of our schools have a resource officer who is assigned to that school. Their primary office is in our 6 main secondary schools. So Bonneville, Hillcrest, Thunder Ridge, Black Canyon, Sand Creek, and Rocky are where they have their full-time office, but then they're assigned to each elementary and smaller high school as well.
Okay.
But only I can't even say full-time, because while that's their office, they're still not full-time there because they are out at those other schools and helping and supporting them.
So do we have full-time officers in the high schools? But
You know, I
they cover the,
Yeah, so their office is in the high school, and I'd say that's their primary location. I'd be reluctant to say full-time because they are assigned out and working in other schools when they're called to those other schools or checking in on them. So I think it just, since we're discussing, I think it's worth noting, this is an area where we really lack state funding for this. And so the Safe and Drug-Free School money we receive, do we use any of that for resource officers? We use that for a fraction of it. The contract also includes the DARE officer program, which is really primarily what we're using that Safe and Drug-Free School. So we are very much dependent on our supplemental levy to be able to provide those resource officers in our schools.
and we've had a discussion about security in the schools, and I think the resource officers are vital in that equation. So since that
I would
was,
just say for a number of reasons, and I don't know how much I'm going to spend, but I mean, obviously, in the wake of Uvalde, having an armed presence is one significant deterrent, but more so than that, it's the relationship that they're able to build with kids. Just over my time in the district, I've seen we've got great resource officers. The ones that stick are great and great at building relationships with kids. If they don't like that, they don't stick around as resource officers very long. And we're really blessed. We've got very veteran resource officers that have been in our district for years and years, and it's really, to me, that's as critical, even more critical than having an armed presence in the schools, is really the relationships they build with the kids.
any other questions from board members on the resource officer contract? So since that was pulled from the consent calendar, we do need to take action on that contract. So I would ask for a motion to approve the school resource officer proposed contract as corrected with 6 officers.
So moved.
Moved by Greg Calder,
Second.
seconded by Paul Jenkins. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, we'll now turn the time over to Dr. Wilson again to discuss proposed bonds for the future.
So, yeah, it is that time where we again have to be considering potential or possible bonds to meet our growing student population. We went to Ammon Days on Saturday, and it was just a great time to interact with the community, and lots of questions about are we still, and also over in Boise, we went to the administrator conference, and lots of questions about are you still growing like you were? And my answer is I'm pretty sure we are. COVID definitely kind of put a blip into things, but last year we did see that growth that we were used to of about 300 to 350 students. We're fully anticipating that again this year, but we'll know a whole lot more here in starting next week after we've completed registration this week, but really the next couple of weeks will tell us a lot about where our growth patterns are. So, but we, as the board is well aware, and I think our community is well aware, we have taken some measures again this year to address the growth in our district. We appreciate the board's support in changing boundaries. We've taken a few phone calls. I think Jason's taken most of those with some frustration from patrons not agreeing with the decision we made, particularly with that kind of island we created to send to Falls Valley. And I agree, and when they're telling us, we think that's a stupid decision, it's certainly not a great decision, but it's literally what we have to do, and Jason has done a great job of saying, well, if we don't do that, what should we do? And the answer has just been, well, we know we have to move somebody, just don't move us, and that's unfortunately, kind of the reality with these situations. So, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the boundary changes we made, but we're getting a lot of calls from my own elementary school as well, even with that change, that they're continuing to grow, and it's gonna be a tight squeeze at Iona. So we really do have to look at a bond and how we're gonna address growth, at least here on the Iona corridor, that's just continuing to add more and more students to our schools, and we're continuing to see development here. So just as a preface to the possible things we could put into the bond, this is the plan that we proposed back in 2019 through our facilities group, that laid out really a 12-year plan and what we should be bonding for, and I want to emphasize, to meet the growth demands in the district. So what this plan lacked was any planning for large-scale replacement or repair projects that unfortunately are something we're also going to have to look at, and particularly when we asked our patrons to support an increase to the plant facility levy that was not approved, where those major projects haven't gone away, and we're going to have to find funding sources for those. So just for some backstory, you'll see a lot of red line in this. When we, so 2019 we put this together, we went to patrons with a bond proposal to add on to Hillcrest and Bonneville and to build another elementary school, and that bond measure failed significantly. It was, I think, 42%, and so the red line things here are really all the things that were planned as second, third, fourth phases if that bond would have passed. And so without that bond passing, that really has eliminated, in my mind at least, any discussion of those additions to Hillcrest and Bonneville for the foreseeable future. So things we have done, we didn't quite do this, but as you'll see in 2019, we said we need to do some relocation of our ER programs, and again, that was one of those key changes we made this year, where we've done some relocations and actually moved the ERR away from Summit Hills, and now we've located it at Cloverdale and a Bridgewater and a Mountain Valley. So the outcome is different, but there's no question we recognized even back in 2019 we're going to have to do something with those ERR programs. So that's really the only thing we've been able to do for 2019, and then just kind of going down a little bit, in 2026 we had the item of purchasing land for a secondary campus, which we've been able to do with the proceeds from our last bond, and so that item is checked off the list. So that really brings us to 2022. And I guess one thing that's worth bearing in mind is this plan called for a new elementary school bond in 2019, which would have built one elementary school. The one that's here in 2022 would have been the second elementary school, presumably on the south end. Yeah. And then the item right below that, renovations in comparison to Avenue Elementary School, that was not part of the original plan. That is something that we've got to have a discussion about this evening as well. And then some other things we have been able to do in 2022, interestingly, we talked about renovating the annex, knowing that Black Canyon would be open, which it has been now for Bonneville Online or Gate, and we went in and did that for Bonneville Online. While we didn't directly access ESSER funds to do that, ESSER funds created enough flexibility in our plant facilities fund that we were able to use plant facilities to do that and then replace those with ESSER dollars. Is that a fair statement, Guy? So that renovation has happened, and Bonneville Online has now moved into the annex, which is great because Bonneville Online has certainly outgrown their former location. But I do think it's worth noting that comes with a loss of what had been 200 seats at the middle school level because we were using the annex for Rocky Mountain. So just that's a key thing to keep in mind is as we make those changes, it does have impacts in other areas. And then we also had a note there to relocate Gate. We had some discussion about relocating Gate to Sand Creek this year, but ultimately we decided that Falls Valley was still a good home for it, and we wanted to keep it at Falls Valley until we really have to use Falls Valley for growth purposes. So that's just a quick update of that plan, and again, you can see almost I'd say the majority of those things have been struck from the plan. The one other thing that's on there that I didn't strike out yet, but we had a pretty good discussion about today, was that we felt we need to put 4 additional classrooms at Thunder Ridge. For those of you that were here, we cut out 8 classrooms at Thunder Ridge, and we kind of wish we would have at least had the framing for those, so we could have gone in and finished them, but we didn't do that. I'd say right now and Heath and Jason and Guy, I think, agreed with this. I don't think doing additions at Thunder Ridge is going to be the right decision. I think we're likely going to have to shrink boundaries rather than doing additions there. Personally, I'd rather see the additions go to our older schools and we're really trying to address the needs at Bonneville and Hillcrest rather than adding on to our newest schools. So I guess it's not a hard no, but that's at least our thinking is we're likely looking at shrinking boundaries for Thunder Ridge and for Black Canyon, probably within the next 4 to 5 years. So questions on any of that update on that plan? Okay, so with that, let me then share out of all my tabs. Got Jason's level tabs going here. Essential standards, special standards. So what I'm sharing with the board tonight is, I guess, a big picture of the things that could potentially be included in a bond. And Chris, can you see that, or do I need to reshare my screen? I'm guessing I'm going to have to reshare.
Yeah, I can see it this time.
Okay, so you see that potential bond projects FY22? Perfect, okay. So the first, these are listed in order of priority. 3 and 4 maybe flipped as far as priority, but the first 2 things are the things we feel like we absolutely need to be considering in the bond. So the first one is an elementary school here on the north side. The price tag is killing me, but that price tag is very similar to the price tag for Black Canyon. So just as we've seen inflation go up, John has been working with Headwaters to get current estimates. One of the estimates they got back on a recent school was $400, just over $400 a square foot. So it's incredible. I think when we were first talking about Thunder Ridge, it was $200. So that price has doubled in about 8 years. So you know, best case scenario is maybe the inflation recedes and we're not looking at that cost, but it's going to be better to be thinking that worst case scenario, I think, is we're looking at those costs. So the size of that school, though, I think is one thing I want to emphasize, because the increased cost isn't just because inflation's gone up. We're also discussing a larger elementary school. That elementary school size that we're discussing would have room for 750 students in general education classrooms, and then also room for special education programs. So really, from a total classroom standpoint, it's more of a 900 student size school. So very similar to Black Canyon size as far as number of classrooms. But as far as the number of general education students that would be enrolled there, we'd be looking at a maximum of 750 students. So between the increased size of the school as well as the increased cost for construction is why we're seeing a bigger price tag on that. Any questions about that school? I think we've had quite a bit of discussion about that over the last few months. So
Yeah, generally been in the 12 to 16 range for elementary school.
So I think Summit Hills, if I remember right, was right around 12 million. So that was our last elementary school that we opened, and that opened in 2013. So I think 12 million is what sticks in my mind, because I remember that was our first one in double digits. And then as we were starting, I know in 2014 we were looking at about a $15 million to $16 million school. And then the 4% factor we had in as we were looking at these estimates isn't even close to what the current prices are.
This is 25% available capacity.
Then Summit Hills, I should pull up my book, but I think Summit Hills was really about a 600 to 650 student total capacity, so 650 to 900, so I'd say it's about 25% bigger off the top of my head, 25 to 30 maybe.
That was,
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and
it's just incredible, and John hasn't, some costs have kind of come down a little, haven't they? But
So he's using this on the bids they just did on the elementary school they're trying to build in Blackfoot. and their HVAC systems came in $1.2 million over his estimate when the bids came in. What's going on is because the market is so uncertain, everybody is inflating their bids to protect themselves, trying to make sure that in the course of construction, they don't get nailed with a surprise.
Seems like that ham cafeteria keeps going up every time we talk about that.
It does, yeah, yeah. So that does take us to the next group, Chad, and that is, there are some significant repair / replacement issues that we're looking at. As you know, the Hammond cafeteria is our top priority there. That's just in dire need of replacement, and we're literally on borrowed time before we're going to have to start busing meals into that school because the facility simply can't handle the kitchen there. So that is a significant safety concern and one that we want to address. I think it's worth probably noting that it's an older school, but we believe that it still has great use and great life, and even if we do decide to stop using it as an elementary school, there are other ways we can use it as a school that we'd want a cafeteria there. So I don't think it's a short-sighted decision to put a cafeteria that can continue to support that as a functioning school.
That was an old cafeteria when I went to grade school. Oh, it really was.
Yeah, no, I mean, they brought that down out of the hills in Ozone probably more than 100 years ago, so it's something else that's still the functioning cafeteria there, so.
Well, my question was going to be, you put that kind of money in the cafeteria and on the roof, then you've got a 15-year commitment to maintain that school.
Yeah.
But down further, we've got a suggested Southside Elementary School to replace that school.
Yeah.
But you've answered the question. I think there's other uses for the building. Is what the district is looking at.
Yeah, that would still necessitate a cafeteria. So.
And that model of the cafeteria could be taken apart and moved to a different location as well. The steel building and those things. So. It could be utilized more so than Hammond if it shows up to utilize Hammond.
Yeah. So the two big projects at Hammond are replacing the cafeteria and replacing the roof. Bonneville's roof, we're not quite as on the same clock as we are with the cafeteria at Hammond, but that is a large project that right now our plant facilities budget simply isn't sufficient to address. And so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but again, if we would have had that additional funding from the plant facilities levy, we could have started putting annual money into that to save up so we could do the roof replacement. And then the last one that's drawn certainly some attention from our community and some criticism is the irrigation system at Hillcrest. John can provide more details, but it simply isn't sufficient to water the grounds that are there from the canal. And as a result of that, we're losing our grounds again. And so I don't know if John wants to add anything else to that, but current estimate on that replacement is $500,000.
Yeah, bottom line is the arteries carrying the water to the system just aren't big enough to really maximize the pumps that we have in place. And so if we put the right, main line in place, we'll be able to get the water where we need to. And if you just want to see a couple of examples of that, I don't know how many of you have been around long enough to remember what Stinger Stadium and the surrounding grass looked like for years and years. And once we got the right main line, the right pump, the right sprinkler heads, we were able to turn it into some of the best grass we have in the district. Out at Black Canyon and Thunder Ridge, with the robust systems we put in there, we're just able to put out really a lot of water in a hurry. Makes a huge difference in our abilities to keep those things green.
I guess the criticism from patrons could be, why was that under engineered?
Yeah, and really the simple answer is they were put on city systems when those buildings were built. I don't know why the decision was made not to use the existing groundwater, which was there, but they were engineered and designed for the city systems. With what's happened with Hammond City Water, with the costs, with just the fact that they don't want us on that system.
to irrigate that much grass anyway. It's just not engineered for the pump that we've now put in the ditch. And plus, the two systems were designed separately. Now we're trying to operate them jointly, and it just.
So we're utilizing surface water rights out of the canal
Correct.
to irrigate that?
Yes.
And the original design was, city
Yes.
water.
And Chairman Dance, I think the other key thing though is, I was in college when Hillcrest opened, so I wasn't part of the district, but I think they did a lot of things as cheaply as they could. And so when that school was built, the baseball field wasn't there, the soccer field wasn't there, the softball field is now there. None of those things were there, so we've also significantly expanded the grounds way beyond what they intended when that school was built.
What? So the replacing Bonneville High School roof, $2 million, that's, I mean, is there any way we could do that in stages to?
And that's,
The way the roof is designed, we can do it in stages.
yeah.
$2 million is the entire roof?
Correct.
And I'd say that's a very rough estimate right now based on other roofing projects we've done. So really the intent is to talk about which things do we want to include, and then John can go out and get some better quotes for us to get it tightened up. Yeah.
Is that the original roof?
It is.
So 40 years.
Well, no, I'm sorry, it's been replaced one time. In that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got to be, like 20 some odd years ago, we got new fabric.
Is it fabric with rock on top of it?
No rock, it's just the fabric.
Where's the problems, John, the main problems?
So right now, we just got minor little leaks here and there, that you get with the roof, but we don't have anything anywhere near what we've got in Ammon. It's just, the right planning to do.
Sure.
Is we know that roof has a 20-year life expectancy, and we can probably nurse it along. We could also, what we had been doing in the district is we've been putting on these fluid applied coatings on top of those surfaces to try and get more life out of the roof. So a lot of our roofs in the district, we've done that. The fluid applied coatings have gotten almost as expensive as putting a new fabric on. And so it doesn't make sense to spend 3/4 the amount of money to get 10 years, half the life, where if you just plan on putting new fabric on, you're gonna get 20 years and, pay only a quarter more potentially for that.
I understand the economics, but getting the money's the thing, so.
And I think another thing that's important to know is when we talk about the economics, and Scott has referenced the plant facility budget several times. One thing that if we could get our community to agree to raise that, you're not paying interest on top of the cost. If we fund these through bond projects, you're paying for that roof for the 17 to 20 years, and literally you finish paying for that roof when the roof is no longer useful to you, and you're just starting all over again and pay interest on the project. So really, in my mind, from a business standpoint, it'd be much preferable to seek a plant levy that would fund these projects, help us stay on top of our maintenance load, and we wouldn't pay interest for our repairs.
But the plant levy, it's a 10-year levy, and we're only in the second, maybe third year.
But you can amend.
But you could go in.
Yeah, we could, yeah, I was gonna say, that is an option with at least some of these projects, is to say, instead of putting these into a bond, we would rather go out and ask the voters again to approve an increase to the plant. The other thing we do have though, that you don't have in the plant facility levy, is the state bond equalization funds that it doesn't always match interest, but it's fairly close. But one way or the other, it's gonna have to come from local dollars, so.
We're currently at 1.5 a year.
On the plant,
2.8.
2.8?
2.8.
what would you want?
We asked for 3.8. That now, we're really operating on a 12-year-old budget.
With
So
6 less schools? I
with
think we got
with
6
six
more
more
schools than that.
schools, more grass, more pavement, yeah, more everything.
Yep.
So it'd save us money if we could convince people to do that.
Yeah, I believe so. And you're paying as you go.
But the state fund almost offsets all the interest?
Almost, yeah. I mean, there's always factors, so it's never like a guarantee of it's gonna pay your interest, but for us, it comes out pretty close.
So in recent news articles, the state superintendent of public instruction received $47 million from the
Surplus?
lottery,
Yeah.
thanks, Greg. The lottery, which is, I mean, then of course she waters that down, but
Yeah,
each district should get something
we do,
for maintenance and replacement.
we do.
So do we have an idea how much that's going to be?
It'll be around $1 million.
$1 million there.
But that's already dedicated to what we have to spend for maintaining our existing buildings.
But Bonneville's an existing building.
Right.
But it's
But
budgeted.
it's already
It's already
budgeted.
budgeted.
Oh, the
as
million
part
is
of the
budgeted
maintenance.
into,
Right.
along with the facilities levy.
Right. It pays for the salaries and benefits of our maintenance personnel and all the day-to-day maintenance that goes on in the district.
You've always got an answer.
It's never a good one.
That's my job.
So I'd say to me, those are the two significant categories, and I think there's some options, in number 2, but I really do believe we've got to do something to address the cafeteria and roof at Hammond Elementary, so,
So, can I ask this
Yeah.
question, Scott? Maybe John can help me out here. We had a group gather not long last winter, made some recommendations. We followed through with some of those recommendations. For example, we have worked on boundaries. We are selling excess property. So, and we're not finished with that. That's gonna take more time. But, and the money that we've got in our bond savings, what are we estimating that will add up to, John, for a guide?
so I just want to make sure we're clear, so when we say bond savings, the fund, the money we still have available from Black Canyon is about $1.25 million.
Okay,
And then property sales, so we sold the property at north of Lincoln, we're in the process of selling the property north of Lincoln High School for about $375,000. The board will be considering an offer or a purchase agreement tonight for the property on Hit Road for $1.5 million. And then the other one, the appraisal that the board will be presented with is $800,000, and I think the offer on that is $600,000. So somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000, I would say is a safe bet on that property. So 600 and 375, so that's roughly $1 million, and then another 1.5 is roughly $2.5 million from property sales, plus 1.25 from the Black Canyon
so that's,
interest. Yeah.
okay, so that's 3 point, okay. Thank you. So that,
2.75, is that right? 1.5 and 1 and, 3.25, yeah. Yeah.
how much was
$3 million.
it? So that covers the bus warrant.
Yeah, so that does take us to the
That
third.
number keeps going up too, John.
Come on, John.
So, yeah, HVAC is a critical thing with that too. So that is the third item that's there. So in this case, our intent would still be to seek authorization to use the Black Canyon funds for the bus garage. Then we would combine that with the property sale dollars that we have. And I would say And potentially, if necessary, we do still have some extra dollars we could draw down on as well. That would ultimately come back and impact our general revenue, but, so anyway, there are ways that we feel like we can fund the bus garage that would not require new additional funds from the community or new additional taxes from the community. And then the fourth item, that really wasn't on our radar until late last spring, but whenever there is a significant school shooting, it does make us take a step back and reflect on our current safety and security of our schools. And there are some items on there, and some we've discussed for years, that I think we may want to consider addressing in the bond. We're on kind of a short timeline, so I'm not sure how much, whether this is the right time or the right bond, but since we're going to bond, I think it's at least worth a discussion. So some things we talked about are securing the classroom and office doors. Randy talked about a way to do that in our classrooms in our executive session that I think is good. 3M also makes film that you can put over windows to make them more bullet resistant, and I know Blackfoot School District is going to do that this fall. It's something we've looked at over the years, so that's one item. Fencing in the elementary school playgrounds and securing those playgrounds, because right now a number of them are wide open that you can literally walk onto. It'd be another significant area we may want to address. Of course, the most expensive option on there is the Bonneville High School open classrooms, but I also think it's probably the one that keeps me up at night the most as far as the lack of ability to secure those classrooms. And then we still do not have controlled access at all of our schools. We continue to make great strides with this, and Rocky Mountain is our latest example. They've done it. Our maintenance team has done a great job in using plant facility dollars and safe and drug-free school dollars to create controlled access there. But again, we had ways to address this in our bond that didn't pass, but Hillcrest, Bonneville lack that. Technical Careers High School lacks that, Lincoln High School lacks that, Bonneville Online Elementary lacks that. So while we've made great progress, we're still a ways away from having all of our schools having that controlled access.
Scott, Bonneville, as of next Monday, Bonneville will have it.
Bonneville High School will? Oh, good, wasn't aware of that.
At least at the entry.
Controlled entryway.
I can't account for all the doors that get propped open.
Yeah, but at least the front entry, they would need to go in through the office, so that's good, John. Appreciate that update. One thing we did talk about this year, due to a few unfortunate incidents in our schools, is putting video cameras into classrooms. Right now we have those in hallways and other more open areas. It would probably, I guess, triple to quadruple the number of cameras we have if we were to put those into classrooms. But there are some viable reasons to have them in classrooms. And then this is down the list for me, but weapon detection systems, of course, in the wake of Uvalde, lots of companies are advertising that they have ways using your current camera systems to be able to detect if people have weapons on them at school. So, and then the last item, he threw this one on, but it's worth a discussion. It's turfing our fields, and that, I mean, given the condition of our fields and the lack of water for our fields, it does start to become a safety issue for our student athletes out there. So this isn't just a cosmetic and trying to keep up with others. Our water situation is creating, it's just wreaking havoc on our fields. So we're not able to maintain those to the level we'd like to, and it certainly could result in student injuries if we're not able to get better water. Is that?
Right now, there's no water in Crow Creek, as an example. I got no way to water the grass at Bonneville or Rocky Mountain.
It's 1 week out, is that what it is?
They're going like 5 days out, and they'll bring it back in until they tell us.
We had some issues at Thunder Ridge High School this summer too, didn't we, John, with the water or not?
Thunder Ridge was more related to just damage to
Okay.
main lines and so on. But that is another canal that they're taking the water out of that canal as well.
Well, turf was, I mean, prior to now has always been considered cosmetic, but no, I'm totally on board with turf fields for the reason that was just stated, because of the cost and the watering and the upkeep and the maintenance of a grass field.
I thought it was once thought that turf was harder on knees than regular grass. That we're actually
It's separate now.
So we just actually had a presentation yesterday from some folks that came in and talked to us about turfs, the pros, the cons, the cost, the maintenance. Here's the caveat on your statement. A well-kept grass field is the safest surface for students to play on. Keeping a well-kept grass field. So if, like these college fields, professional fields, they're putting, thousands of dollars into the upkeep, and they're keeping everybody off the field until it's game time. Where we have, for instance, a facility where we're sharing a field between two high schools and all the things that go along with that, we're really, I don't think, gaining the advantages of a grass field. And then, our other areas as well, we just can't put the same amount of money into those fields.
Well, you've got a freshman game, a JV game, and a varsity game every week at Thunder. At Thunder,
Yes, at least. There's some weeks where we play on Thursday, or Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday because of the way the schedules come together.
Should we have somebody do a cost analysis of mowing the grass, the sprinkler systems, the water?
So this guy basically provided us with that. And what he's telling us is, you often hear that turf fields save you a ton of money for a variety of reasons. And his take is if you maintain a turf field correctly, and you're comparing it to a grass field that you're maintaining the way I described, then there probably is some savings. Well, for us, after listening to that discussion, I think we're probably a wash with what we would have to do to a turf field as far as keeping it swept, keeping it clean, those kind of things. We'd be pretty close.
Yeah, you have to add those little black beads back in.
So the wind, a lot just depends on the surface you put on top. There are better surfaces for keeping the pellets in place. But that's one of the things. I mean, you've got the equipment to groom that field, to move those things back into place, to keep them leveled out. That is part of that process.
Does it have wind resistant turf?
Well, I mean, they have it that's more wind resistant. But the thing is, I mean, I could go into the details of how the fabric is woven, but that's the bottom line, right? If you want that field that you're seeing on TV with all those individual strands of carpet that look like grass, that's not the field that you're gonna get that keeps I mean, it'll still look pretty good, but it's woven in a different way, so you're basically creating a crisscrossing net of fabric over rather than just the single strands.
What is the rough cost of one football field?
So a lot of that depends on, what's there and what you want to do with your track and so on and so forth, because all those things are factors. But if you're just looking at the turf itself, the excavation, the infill, all the things they have to do to build a proper base, put it in, you're looking at about $1 million these days just for that. If now you want to put curb around your track to protect it and do things like that, then you're adding, somebody told me the other day that Rigby wasn't able to do that, which created some problems that they, even though they got supposedly all these donations, they're still maybe $300,000 short of paying for the whole thing. And so there's a lot to, take in, and we're trying to get all the information we can in advance so that if we do go with turf, we really know what we're doing, what the costs are, what equipment we have to maintain it. For instance, little known fact, most of these fields, college fields, have irrigation systems. They just put great big spray guns on the edge of the field. They're still cooling the surface and so on and so forth. So it isn't just as simple and cut and dried as we're not going to necessarily use water anymore. There's a lot of, I think a lot of things we have to look at carefully as we move forward with those decisions.
In eastern Idaho, we have a few districts that now use turf fields, is that right?
Yeah, Madison's the only one now, but Rigby, obviously this fall will start, and so will 91.
West Jefferson.
Well, true. I will tell you this, that I would not model my efforts after West Jefferson. That has been in many ways a debacle. They just put a field down there, no markings, no nothing. One of the ways we would save time and money is paint and personnel out there, marking the fields and doing all that.
How do you use it for soccer and football for markings?
So you can have it marked with both,
Both?
yeah.
And the only reason I asked is just so that we learn, we can find out what mistakes and problems.
And then that's our plan is to, as this, year unfolds, we'll visit with 91, we'll visit with Rigby, we'll visit with Madison, and my plan is that we really have a firm understanding of what the true costs are and what the benefits, if they're seeing benefits, what those benefits really are. I will say this, we've got our athletic directors right now working very hard to raise funds in the community to try and make turf fields, a reality in our school district. And I think in spite of everything I've said, I think there's still positives to bringing turf to the district. Just in the fact that the amount of use we could put on a field as compared to what we could do now would be a huge gain on our part.
If it's maintained, how long would a turf field last?
He said 12 years is really the most he would ever recommend, and probably 10. But again, he's a guy that's been in the college world most specifically, and he's really looking at it from their standpoint of they've got funds, they've got. I think you'll find most school districts are trying to get. Well, West Jefferson's coming up on 20 years on theirs. So
One of the superintendents that has turf on their field, I talked to him today, and he said that they have to plan, right? Part of their plan facility budget of in 10 years from now, it's going to cost us roughly $500,000 to replace that field. So
I think that's an important thing to know. Instead of $1 million to put it in, but the base remains, right? So now you're really putting a new surface over the base. So when you go to update and upgrade, you're not paying the same kind of costs that your initial installation is.
The more districts that do it around us, the easier it is to maybe get
Yeah.
Thanks, John. And then the last few items is, again, going back to that overall plan, knowing that we had originally intended to be bonding for 2 elementary schools by this point, would be if we did want to consider including the second elementary school as well. And there's really 2 ways to do that. One is just to make it a new school that would again add another 750 seats for a total of 1,500 new seats for elementary students, which would that would get us quite a while. I would ask for another elementary school. I hate to go on record with things, but we've been now a decade since we opened Summit Hills, and I think we'd easily be looking at that if it were in addition to Ammon Elementary School. The other option would be to use it to replace Ammon Elementary School as an elementary school, and in that situation, our current thinking is that we would move the Praxium program out of the vocational building over here, put that at Ammon Elementary, allow that to expand to a 6 through 12 school, and that is frustration, but I don't know if that's the right word, but there are certainly students that are enrolled in that wish they could continue that as their experience in high school, and we simply don't have the room to do that at the vocational building. So we could move Praxium to Ammon Elementary School, and then that would allow additional room to expand Technical Career High School, and Principal Oswald has some ideas about bringing in a culinary arts program, expanding a CNC program,
If the bus garage were completed, then we could also use that as a diesel mechanics program. So that, now, it's still gonna add those many seats, but instead of being at the elementary level, it'll add some at the elementary, some at the high school, and some at the high school level, really, some at the middle school level, so.
Wasn't there an effort to open a praxium program at Hillcrest in the high school?
I wouldn't say the Praxium program, but they're using the same software program that Praxium's based on, so it's called Summit Learning, and it's kind of a mastery-based approach. So, but Praxium itself, we've kind of told students they want that same type of experience, then Hillcrest could be a good fit because they have used that, but it's certainly not the same as what they're doing at Praxium. Is that a fair description, Ty?
Very fair.
Okay. So, feels like we're late in the game to be presenting those many options, but I thought it's at least worth a discussion to say, and realize that it's that issue we struggle with all the time. We want to go with one larger bond and then hopefully not have to go out and ask for a bond again in the next 4, 6, maybe even 8 years, or is it better to break it up into smaller chunks and let the community grow and have, continue to increase our tax base, lower the overall cost. The trade-off of that is, of course, we likely going to continue to see prices for things go up. So I think it's, not sure there's a right or wrong answer. It's just what do we feel the right decision is for our community.
Comments from the board?
A couple, I think, one, if District 91 was able to pass their bond, which I think is extremely unlikely. I was reading an article, the largest bond passed in Idaho today was by Boise for $178 million. They're asking 230 or 250? But if they were successful, then they want to remodel and take the existing Idaho Falls High School and make it into a trade school. If that was to happen, I think they had to have a hard time populating it. I would be interested in working with them and looking at combined resources and getting private sector even to go for that one and help, if that all came to be. I do think because most people in this area work with people in 91, as the press works toward November, I think it's unfortunate for us that the small percents that we win bonds by will be greatly influenced by such a large bond that they're proposing. It'll make ours harder to pass. I think that we pushed it back because we wanted more people to vote on it at the general election, and then we found out they were doing it. I think that's just unfortunate for what our purposes were.
And I just say we're not locked into November. I mean, we've kind of had that thought that November would be a good time, but if because of that, if we wanted to wait and run in March, then there's nothing to prevent us from doing that.
See, I'm kind of, if there is a concerted opposition to the bond in 91, it could influence our patrons as well, is what I'm concerned about. I mean, I'm not saying there will be, but it kind of feels like there might be.
And I mean, I recall at one time that we were running at the same time, and it was very easy to paint a broad brush and paint us both in the same light. So I understand that concern.
The same token is if there's a positive vibe in both communities, it could be, it could benefit us.
Or even the contrast, possibly, that's part of the communication. That, it's contrast of 250 million versus 30, 40, or whatever that number would be.
I do think voter confusion can be a real issue though, and that is if they hear it's 250, they might go to our ballot boxes and think they're voting against 250 when they're not. So
There'll be some overlap, I
Yeah,
just.
yeah, I agree.
One other thought is, I think we all agree we need the elementary school, is take some of this money we have and proceed with architectural plans. So at the point in time we are able to pass the bond, we immediately can start construction once the bonding is arranged. I don't know how much time that would save. It's getting more and more streamlined, but it's probably 6 months at least would be.
I think that's a good estimate.
Well, you could wait, so we're thinking November, March, that's only 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah, the big difference is just the general election versus special election. So timing wise, I would say March is the latest we want to go because we do, I believe, want to ask our voters to renew our supplemental levy.
Right.
And so for budgeting purposes, we don't want to be later in March.
So what is the timing, if we run a bond in November, it fails, we have the opportunity then to go back, reconstruct, rethink. Is it a year?
There's no statutory
There's no-
limit on that.
They did try to propose a lot, but
Yeah.
That's right, okay.
There is something to be said for the number of voters that will be out there in November,
Yes.
which will tend to favor enough.
Yeah, if 91 weren't running, I'd really have no reluctance at all, but it makes me a little bit reluctant.
So we've talked, well, we've had discussions with our bond counsel and our finance specialist. Do we have a feel, Guy, about interest at this point?
So it does seem to lag a little bit, but Eric, he has his cushion built in, but he hasn't given me an update on rates, not yet.
So what I'd like to see is our payments, our debt service today, considering the bond that's going away in 2022, after that goes away in 2022, versus our debt service with the new bond.
So I can already answer that
Okay.
without the new bond, because we refinanced, our debt service for the next 10 years is flat.
10 million.
Yeah, 10 million roughly, because we've already restructured for that level payment.
Yeah, so that bond going away doesn't change our
Okay.
bond service.
So our debt service now is 10 million.
Yeah,
Adding this
yeah, we'll increase
would
it.
increase it. Okay.
Yeah. But Eric did have a way to structure it so that it wouldn't increase it past the 10 million.
Oh, okay.
At around 32 to 33 million,
Right.
if the board wanted to keep that service level.
Just by structuring those, laddering those.
Yeah.
Right.
So most of the
Correct.
principal is paid later in the bonds.
Earlier when you said that the state matching funds offset interest, is it focus on interest, or now the interest is doubled, it won't pay it? How does it?
So it depends on several economic factors. I don't know.
I think that's a great question. I mean, off the top of my head, I'd say it may not, with higher interest rates. That's been our experience with lower interest rates, and we'd have to talk to Eric to see what it would look like with higher rates.
I think we've already doubled since March,
What's done?
the bond rate.
Good. Or are you talking like the overnight Fed rate or that kind of thing?
No, I think, weren't we like at 2.9%? It just trickles behind the mortgage rate, it's not that far behind.
Yeah. I can't-
Mortgage rates have gone from 2.9 to what, 5.75?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would be interested to see that. I don't know. Maybe
do we-
Brian knows, so.
Do we shop the bond rate? Do we put it out in bid just like the building?
So when they sell the bond, they're shopping the rates of the bond.
Yeah.
Then they're selling multiple bonds, and so that's the service that Piper Seven provides, is they're the ones that are the underwriters and selling that bond, and so they're out negotiating the rate of that, but they're giving us their best estimate of what it's going to be like.
But that's good, but we also have an option to get the quote from someone else as well, or are we always committed to this bond book?
No, we can always evaluate, really the two that I know that, are prevalent in Idaho are Zions and Piper Settler, so I'm not sure who else is even in the market here, but it's typically those two.
In fairness, all they're doing is underwriting the bonds, right?
Yeah.
In other words, they're, I mean, investors are the ones that are setting the rate, it's a market.
It's market driven.
Yeah, the investors are, and, you know, they have to price it to be competitive with what the market's doing, so.
There's very little variance.
Yeah.
Well, the underwriting, anybody that underwrites is gonna charge a fee, and I think the fees are gonna be very similar.
Yeah. Zions,
It's the service
yeah,
that really is helpful to us in that regard, and Harry Piper has been very good.
and Zions does provide an additional service. They talked to us about it a couple of times, and I can't remember what it's called.
Municipal advisory.
Municipal advisor, where they can come in and kind of, for lack of a better term, be a watchdog on that, but
Yeah.
we've had such a positive relationship, we haven't felt like it's worth investing in additional money to do that. I'd say it's,
Well, if there wasn't a cost and we're just getting a quote, even if it's close, we can stay with our traditional one, but it just makes it look like we are doing our due diligence.
Right.
Well, I think there are patrons out there that feel like it would be an error, a mistake to run a bond in November competing with 91, but I don't know,
Worst
I
case
just-
scenarios.
I just don't know where to go with it.
If they lose November, then they decide to go March.
Well, they're gonna have, if they lose November, they're gonna have to do some major restructure of that bond, I think.
I was gonna say, it depends, yeah, it depends on how close that margin is, right?
Right, I mean, I know there's needs
Yeah.
in both districts, so.
Is there just two states that have supermajority for bonds? Us and Penn?
Well, I think multiple states have super majorities, but I think we may be the only ones that are at 2/3. They're typically 55%. Yeah, or 60.
I guess we're super.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to make a decision with regards to timing and what we want to bond for.
Is that what our meeting at the end of the month's for? We'll have the student numbers and we'll have the
Yeah.
property
So
assessment.
if property assessment's still dicey, so Guy has a preliminary estimate from the county assessor's office, and it's significant. Our market value has increased and by another 50%, which I've never seen. I mean, 50% is a little high, but in 40%, which the highest we've ever seen before in the last 20 years is 18%. No, our taxable value as a district
Is that,
was
it's
up.
like 5.5 billion then?
That's over 6.
Over 6?
Yeah,
And we were 3.4?
we were 4.2.
4.2, 4.3.
Yeah, yeah.
No question, our
That is good.
levy's going to drop. That does not necessarily mean your personal taxes will decrease.
Yeah,
but-
I mean, they should some, just because there's more people that have moved in that are sharing the tax burden, so we
I
should
think
see an
there's a lot
increase.
more new homes that went on
Yeah,
the rolls.
yeah. If all of their factors are equal, then we should see a slight reduction.
Just for the school portion, all the rest
Right.
of the
Yeah,
municipalities will be going up.
yeah. Yeah,
So it feels like to me, I can't imagine going past number 3.
yeah,
And 3 is really
Yeah.
using existing resources not included in the bond. So really, for bond purposes, I can't imagine us doing more than 1 or 2. I'm not stuck on that, but I'm just saying that that's what it feels like. Then the second question would be timing.
yeah.
And I guess I would want to think through if we delay till March, we also have other votes coming up for supplemental. That's the only one, I guess.
Right, so I think my recommendation would be that whenever we decide to run the bond is when we run the supplemental. Right, so we're not going, so we're not asking our patrons to go out and vote twice. I think that'd be a huge mistake.
Yep.
And you mentioned also, Scott, that we have to get patron approval to utilize the savings, the Thunder, or the Black Canyon savings account.
Yeah.
So, but you're suggesting maybe we postpone that.
Yeah, at the point that we decide to do number 3, we will have to go out to our voters and ask for approval for that, so.
Use that one.
And so, Chad, I guess I would say that to me depends if, really on the supplemental levy is, for me, again, just in the interest of not having a special election only to approve reauthorization of those funds, I would want to run that in conjunction with the supplemental levy vote.
So does it make sense to run supplemental and the authorization in November and the bond in March? Is there any logic for that?
If you're okay, my feeling is our voters perceive us as always asking for more and more. So I would rather run one together and just be articulate rather than saying, you just asked us for money it's like the kids knocking at my door, right? Were you just here last week asking for funds for this and now you're back again? That's really how it feels. So I think whatever we do this year, it should be one election. My personal opinion, but that's all it is, so.
Yeah, I can see the logic.
What is the typical architectural fee? It's a percent of the, 7%?
We've been paying about 6.5% for our project.
But not just architect, that's engineering as well as.
That's the architect and engineering, combined.
So that'd be 2.1 million roughly on something like this?
Yeah.
Well, I think we can get our numbers pretty close without using money that we have to pay an architect without knowing that we would get approval. I mean, I'm a little concerned about giving money to an architect. I mean, that kind of happened to us with the Hillcrest Bonneville situation, because we had the money and we paid the architect. We still own those plans if we ever wanted to utilize them, but so it wasn't
And voters
totally
gave us,
done.
that was
approved
permission and approval
to do it, but we weren't.
As part of that, we have an elementary design too.
Yeah.
As part
Oh
of,
yes, we do, don't we?
at least the schematics are there.
Does that include, did that extend to elementary schools as well? Or was that specific to Bonneville and Hillcrest?
Just Bonneville Hillcrest, I believe.
But we
The
have a
authorization,
design, so they can give us a pretty accurate.
Right.
It's just, it won't be able to shorten, I mean, it'll shorten some of the design process if we're saying this is our design and then we're just really getting it up to code versus trying to get engineers to design something from the ground up, so.
The one unique thing of our time, I think, is apparently we've dropped down to a 40-year record inflation. We were at 42, but July wasn't even, it didn't increase and didn't go down. I've been watching, I watch OSB just for fun, at Home Depot, and it's gone from $42 to $17. So I think some construction costs are coming down, and as interest rates go up and the housing market slows, I think the bids will be more competitive. That's the only unique thing we got going. Watching where the interest hits the high point and starts down. So if you knew that, we wouldn't be working really well.
I agree, I think the supply chain disruption kind of stuff and all that, time is probably our ally in that sense. So those costs are probably going to come down in time. I mean, if in fact we're into lower economic growth / recession, then generally that would suggest interest rates are not.
That hearing for the 3,000 homes in the Anlin area, which is right next to our schools. So, the article I read said that they asked about the infrastructure and they were gonna make like 21 improvements at intersections and places as part of that project. And somebody asked them about schools and they said there is something in there for that. Does anybody have heard any clarification?
Yeah, well, we met with that developer, they asked to meet with us several times, we'd had some discussions about, having property inside of that development, so.
That we'd have to buy from?
Not necessarily. We were working towards a negotiation where it would make sense for them to donate it to the district, so, but no final commitments, but that was the discussions we were having.
And that tax base per se wouldn't it would put us further back on our housing expenditures because there is gonna be some commercial property in there, but residential homes don't seem to keep up if they have, what we figure, 1.8 children per household.
Yeah, it's about two kids per school.
Two, and so the cost of housing exceeds the money we get from the state for housing. We don't get any from the state.
Yeah, I mean, we get money from the state to educate those students, but not to build the buildings where they're going to go to school.
So that can make our problem worse.
And that particular development is a 10-year plan. I mean, it's not
And they
gonna be
said-
done all of a sudden.
15 to
Said
20.
Monday night, 15 to 20 years.
20-year plan.
But
That's 10,000 people likely.
Planning and zoning recommend a no vote on that according to the newspaper.
Yeah.
Amanda?
One of the things about, I don't know if it would make much difference, but we'll have solid numbers from the assessor's office by when, Guy?
Last year was until mid-September.
So by the end of September, still have to, if we have a November election, we could still include that information to the,
So our ballot due to the county for the November election is like September 10th, I believe.
so an advantage for March would be we would have that solid
Yeah.
information, which,
Yeah, so as I'm thinking about the ballot disclosure, that's gonna drop the amount on the ballot disclosure by 25%. Am I thinking about that right? If we had a 50% increase, it's gonna drop it by 25%. Is that math right?
I think so.
So, that could be a significant reason, right? Because we disclose on the ballot is your cost
Yeah,
of
right.
current conditions, and that could radically change from, if we don't have those numbers in August, it will radically change by September.
When does the county send out their assessment?
June, they send assessment notices to
Homeowners in
citizens.
June, but
June.
the guy just said we didn't get ours till September.
They send them out in September?
Well, they'll give us our value in
the
September.
final values are established.
In December is when they send them to
December.
homeowners.
So that might be one reason to wait too, is because then they'll see their taxes stay the same.
Mhm.
Well, that kind of help, that kind of adds to
Yeah,
a feeling that we maybe should wait till March,
Yeah.
till then we've got we've got the solid numbers from the prior year.
yeah,
It might help us in the information we provide to the public.
yeah.
I think 8 out of 10 people think their property taxes are going to go up because their
Mhm.
valuations go up.
Right.
So when they see that, I think that'll be comfortable.
Yeah, it'll definitely give us, and we can all bring our property disclosures and show exactly what our taxes did.
And that will have a huge line in the public anyway. This is awesome, our taxes didn't go up.
Thank you so much.
Guarantee it, guarantee, I just see it already.
I think between the opposition we would receive as slipstream if you will. From the 200 and whatever their amount is. I really think that I would suggest we go with the March.
That's my feeling at this point. And I'm with Greg, I like, I mean, whatever the elementary school, that's the primary. I'm a little unsure of the roof at Bonneville, if we could push that back. I'd rather, but I understand the importance of planning too and maintaining.
But that would be something, if we have to go back a second time, that we could reconsider and say that that would be one of the things that we would drop.
That's true.
So it gives us some wiggle room as far as what we could do with the bond structure.
For me, the other thing March does is, and I appreciate great input, I wouldn't mind getting some input from our patrons about number 4 and seeing are there priorities there that they believe we should be doing and they would support doing. Give us just some time to work through those safety improvements.
Maybe you could suggest 4 plans in there and let them go through them.
Yeah.
Because you can't prevent it all, and
Yeah.
the biggest bang for the buck.
How does the Teachers Association feel about video cameras in classrooms?
They were open to it, and I think in some ways are supportive of it, which is vastly different than 10 years ago when we first started putting cameras in our schools. Well, 15 years when we started putting cameras in our schools. I don't know where the time goes.
I was gonna ask Gordon, looks like just left, I was gonna ask Gordon a question about that. How do you monitor all, Gordon, if there's a video camera in every classroom, who monitors that? Who makes sure that they're all working? I mean, does the teacher have to test it every day, or?
So right now, we have probably about 1,300 to 1,400 cameras in the district. If we were to put a camera in every classroom, that would probably go to close to 5,000 cameras in the district. I mean, that's just a guess off the top of my
It's
head.
700 classrooms, so it's
700,
more.
so 700 more. So you're, to actively monitor, I don't know that anybody would actively monitor those.
Okay.
It's more of
But
a,
it's available if we need
it's
to
available,
go back and look.
yeah, I mean,
So what would be the priority? What classrooms would we prioritize? Would we prioritize elementary schools?
I don't know that you, from my personal opinion, I don't know that you can, because, you know, then you say, is an elementary classroom more important than the secondary? I think there's issues at both levels that would say you couldn't pick and choose. I mean, you could, but to say one's more important than the other, I think would be not a correct
So,
statement.
but looking at the historical shootings, school shootings,
Well,
is it high schools or elementary?
I think the purpose of the camera is not going to stop a school shooting. The purpose of the camera that Scott's talking about, that we talked about as leadership team, is there's incidents that have happened in a classroom with a student teacher that you could then go back and review video and prove one way or the other that the incident was either fabricated or it was actually happened. And you have accusations of inappropriate conduct that could then be disproved or approved, either way. That would be the bigger issue for the camera in the classroom.
It makes for protection for the student and
And the
teachers as
teacher.
There would be a lot of cost in maintaining the video. We'd have to, I mean, right now we have 8 servers and thousands of terabytes of storage, but we'd have to significantly increase that, so.
Is there microphones or just cameras?
You could, if we chose to go that route.
I wondered if there was software that would monitor words or.
There is. If you want to pay, you could.
Or even the footage, something, I don't know, you'd have to have a small army watch them all. wouldn't you?
Yeah, video is not going to be actively monitored. It will be something you can go back and review. It's a passive monitor.
Yeah. And if there were an unfortunate event, it would trigger feeds to the sheriff's office that would have active monitoring at that point. So I mean, in that scenario, there would be a benefit, but the primary use, like Gordon said, is really to have evidence of what may or may not have happened in the classroom. So it feels like we have consensus to wait till March, and I think gives us time to continue working through this and really get some numbers.
You know, there's no action required, but I think bring this discussion to a closure,
Can we get Carissa's input?
yes.
I'm just curious.
Carissa, what's your comments on the
My biggest holdup, I mean, my biggest thing about November is just that people are gonna be at polls. And so we're gonna get the numbers that I do not think we'll see in March. But that's, I mean, I see the pros of waiting till March too, so that's my only pro for November.
My personal feeling is March, because we have, I think we can show, I think we'll have really better numbers.
Yeah.
It's 3 months away from November. I don't know, is it fine?
But not that far.
But that's my feeling, so again, we're not voting, we're not taking action.
Well, no, but we need direction, so
Yeah.
either we have to prepare a ballot for
Right.
3 weeks or not, so. Okay. Okay.
That was the primary purpose of this meeting later this month, isn't it?
Right, would be to, we'd actually have to approve the resolution at that meeting or immediately thereafter, so.
Yeah, I do think, I mean, if we're waiting in March, and I think everybody knows this, but just to emphasize it, we have a ton of work to do.
Yeah.
I
And
don't feel quite prepared, but
prepare
for November, because we've got to come back in 2 weeks and approve a resolution.
right.
And we're not sure where the numbers are going to be, and what's going to cost the taxpayers.
Yeah, and I guess the only point I'm making is March will be here before we know it.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of like public awareness kind of stuff that we need to be doing and building that coalition of people who are,
Yeah.
so anyway, I know we all know that, but yeah, we'll be here quickly.
Yeah.
And it feels to me like we've made good progress in that regard. But
Yeah.
I guess it's,
Yeah, I was kicking myself at days that I wasn't better prepared to have some surveys and some ways to collect people's information that don't have kids in school to have ways to communicate with those people. Because we said hi to a lot of folks that day, and I kind of missed an opportunity to continue that communication with them. So we should continue to find those opportunities.
I think on the elementary school, I mean, if people would just breathe for a second and recognize it's been 12-ish years since we asked for a bond for an elementary, and we passed a bond for an elementary school.
Yeah.
And the amount of growth that's happened in 12 years, and the amount of boundary changes,
Yeah.
et cetera, I mean, I can't imagine why somebody would think,
Yeah.
it's greedy bastard, why are they trying to build an elementary school?
No, and honestly, Greg, I feel confident that we have a good plan that our patrons will support. I just really worry about the confusion.
Yeah.
If 91 wasn't running, I'd be saying, let's go full go for it.
What does that 5 months do to us on the back end of the school opening?
It won't change. We're really looking at opening up in, or 2022, so 3, 4, 5, 2025 either way. I feel confident.
I mean, you could potentially, if you went in November, push that if you wanted to, you know. But I feel a lot more comfortable with the 2025 date, just simply because as our architect often tells me, the worse you want it, the worse you get it. And you're just better off to have the time, you're better off to bid, go out to bid when you want to go out to bid, because there are times when you're gonna get better bids. And a great example is Blackfoot going out, you know, for bid in the summer. I mean, they should, anybody sensible to the bidding market could have told them the bids are gonna be high then.
okay, does that help, Scott, or do we need
Yeah,
to?
no, that-
You want to
that
count,
helps.
I mean,
No, we're good.
okay.
That feels like consensus.
Are you okay, Paul?
Absolutely.
Okay, Chris, are you fine with the
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay. All right, very good. Let's move on to learning and instruction. Jason Lawrence?
Thanks, Chad. Normally, Sam said normally I'm at the end of this meeting, so I've got lots of time. I think is what she said. Is that what you said?
No.
Were you doing it on the spot?
Yeah.
3 minutes or something? Yeah, that's good. Okay, so the first policy that we had is the student code of conduct, and if you remember, we presented the last month for a 30-day review. Within that month, I've had a number of conversations. Actually, Laura Waltz is here, and she helped a ton with both the student code of conduct and the student rights and responsibilities. I just appreciate the work that she put in. I told her, well, I think I owe her lunch, and I don't think that even matches what the time and effort that she put into it. But just through that time, we cleaned up a number of things. We also had some conversations with I had a conversation on Monday with middle school principals just about and I'll get down to that one here in a second, about the students' rights and responsibilities. And if you remember, we took those two policies, the student code of conduct and the student rights and responsibilities were just one. They were just the student code of conduct, but it just made for a really big document that we felt like we could split that apart and then be able to guide parents to, where their concern was, hey, this isn't the student code of conduct or the student's rights and responsibilities, but also for principals as well. When I met with principals, June, who was it there with me? Was it June? Yeah, it was June. That was one of the big things that we wanted to do, is to make it more of a usable document instead of just a document that they're like, well, I only use this part of it. And so I just think, I appreciate the help of the principals, and I think just like any of our policies that we change, we say here's what we think is going to work, and we'll see how it goes. And if there are concerns, then we come back and say, hey, we want to look at making an adjustment here or a change here. So yeah, any questions about, I guess, any questions about student code of conduct?
Okay, call for a motion on approval of that document.
So moved.
Moved by Paul Jenkins,
Second.
second by Greg Calder. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. The next one, the next one writes, is that a new document? Is that a new?
It's new, but that was the one that we pulled from the student code of
Okay,
conduct.
okay.
We really wanted to split
Okay,
those two.
so that we split them?
Yes,
Okay.
yep. The content, most of the content, now as we went through and revised both of those, there were changes that we made. There were lots of conversation about it. It felt like, and Laura, she would make a comment to me, I'm not making you feel bad with my comments. And so we had a Google Doc that we were going back and forth with principals. And then the changes we made, I was going back and forth with Laura. She was talking to some patrons and just doing a number of different things with it. And so she put comments in there. And really what we were trying to do is there were certain things in there that made it felt like it was just, like we were trying to be, I don't know, almost just too tough, if that makes sense. And that's just not where we are as a district. What we're trying to do is help and support, but also still be able to give the ability for principals to be able to make decisions that help the schools function, be able to support their teachers. And really, I think separating those two documents will help us be able to say, okay, this is where the student discipline fits, and this is where the student's rights and responsibility fits. So.
I can't remember which one this was in. I had mentioned this to Greg, is under corporal punishment. It prohibits corporal punishment on school property, even by parents. If a parent strikes a child open hand or a fist, that's an assault, and they'd be charges. But if they were attending a basketball game and their 4-year-old knocked down another child and they come up and spank them on the bum, they would be violating your policy. But that might be their custom within reason of our society. That was the only place I thought the verbiage might.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of places in there where, and it's hard, right, when you're looking at policy, because if you get really right down to it, it's like, I think for our principals, they're looking at going, I don't know if I even have noticed a situation like that, if that makes sense. I think so much of it was focused on students and what happens with students and those other outside of things. I'd be surprised if that would even come up as, because what happens, and I think part of it too is being able to, and as I was going through this, it was interesting because you have to have a mindset of just different things. Because when I'm looking at this as administrator, what I'm looking at is when I now have discipline with a student, I'm going back and looking at these different things, saying, okay, now when I put this in the car of school, here's if it's student code of conduct, here's the rule they violated, if it's the student's rights and responsibilities, if it's a dress code type violation, then those are things that I'm looking at. So I think there's certain parts of that yeah, they may not even pay attention to. And I know we talked about that, and I don't remember, I can't remember the exact conversation we had, but it's something we can look at too.
So this policy will be available within, as all policies are, but are students and parents going to be notified that this is now available? And,
Yeah.
I mean, not very many kids are going to read this thing and
No.
try to figure out what their
No.
rights are.
But typically what happens is what I say is, at least when I was in the middle school, I know principals as they do their student code, their student agendas and stuff like that, they're taking parts of this and putting that within that. And then at registration, and it will, for next year's registration, we'll have basically a statement that says, that a parent will have to check on that says, I've read the student code of conduct, I've read the student's rights responsibilities. Does that mean they've read it? Not necessarily, but it has that link there for them to click on it or go to it.
Do you know where that statement is that prohibits parents from exercise, corporal punishment, parents are prohibited from corporal punishment on school property? And just read that out loud and see if everybody likes the verbiage, because it seems like.
Well, we had conversations that about, because in the students and rights, there were some things in there, like we took out, so it's, yeah, I'm gonna look to see if we, because it's like there was one in there about student, was it student records? It was like students would understand.
I just don't think we want to take parental rights away that are reasonable. I mean, obviously, like I say, if they assault, come up and, that boy's in a fight and comes up and punches him in the face on school property, that's assault. But grabbing your child's hand, or if he's grabbing something and you slap their hand so that they wouldn't take it to someone, it just seems, I don't know, if you read it, see if everybody's comfortable with it. I had it found. It's under definitions, I think, of corporal, there's a section on corporal punishment.
Yeah, so the only thing that's in there now about corporal punishment is that each student has the right to, and then it says not to be subjected to corporal punishment.
It went on further and it said, parents were prohibited to exercise corporal punishment on, but there's not a clear definition, but most people would think that would include spanking the child, which obviously they can do in their own private home, but.
And yeah, and the only thing that's coming up when I search.
Dr. Thurber has. I just want to play devil's advocate for a second. In that, as a principal, I've been in a situation. I've just been in a situation where a custodial parent who, there was a custody situation, and a parent who didn't currently have visitation was forcibly removing a child, wasn't hurting them, but was forcibly removing them from the premises. I think I was really grateful at that time for that policy, because I felt empowered to get law enforcement involved and let them sort it out, instead of just allowing it to happen and thinking that I had to just honor, because I didn't know what the parents' rights were in that situation. I knew that the child was in duress, and I knew that I wasn't physically going to try to stop, because it was a man who was bigger than I was. And I think I understand wanting to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I do not want to impose laws or impose rules on parents on what they can do in their home. but when they are in our public school, I have had parents physically assault their children in my presence. And as a public servant, I cannot just allow that to happen. Whether it's slapping them in the face, whether it's hitting them, and I think you're absolutely right. I think any rational person who turns a that. Or I'm just gonna call law enforcement, as a middle school principal, I'm just gonna call law enforcement, call dispatch, and have someone come sort this out. Because I, as the principal, I don't wanna try to sort that out. And I think that's why the policy exists, but that's just my 2 cents.
And there's a line in the student code of conduct that it has a statement about corporal punishment, and then it just talks about the district does not. So here's the whole paragraph. It says the district does not permit corporal punishment as a means for discipline. No teacher, other school employer, administrator shall use physical force or physical contact against a student or strike a student as punishment for a violation of the student code of conduct. And then this is the line you're talking about. It says this prohibition also extends to parents, guardians, or visitors on school grounds. And it says, however, a teacher, other school employer, or administrator shall not authorize to restrain when their behavior poses an imminent risk of serious harm to self or others. And then it references our board policy.
Here's a scenario that I know happened, and I think this was a good father. Some will disagree. They were sitting in a McDonald's outside on a picnic table, and the older brother knocked the smaller boy onto his head on the concrete. He went and picked the child up, turned to that boy, spanked his bum, and sat him on the bench. A guy inside McDonald's knocks on the windows and says, "I'm going to call the police." And he goes, "Go ahead." We need to let parents be parents. He didn't harm that child. It was an instant, in his opinion, what was justified for how serious he could have hurt that younger boy. People can disagree on how they parent, but in our society right now, to take any rights away from parents, I think is, so there's got to be a kinder way to say that reasonable, I don't know, or leave it out, because if they come in and strike them open-handed and knock a 12-year-old boy to the ground, they can be arrested for assault. But I think it's a fine line. I don't know. I just, if a parent read that, I don't want them to think we're telling them they can't use a reasonable measure with their own child on school property.
The language is limited to students though, right? In other words, we're not talking about a 3-year-old being able to be spanked because they're not a student. In other words, that policy wouldn't prevent a parent from administering corporal punishment on a non-student.
No, but it could have been a 5-year-old, but not a 3-year-old.
Yeah, and in the wording, it is against the student.
Yeah, so we're not talking about disciplining non-student younger children, first of all, right? And second of all, I guess the policy question is, do we want to permit corporal punishment to be administered by parents to their own children on school grounds? And I could see why we would say no. I agree, it infringes on parental right to discipline their own child, but it seems like a reasonable infringement to me. But I'm not being hard-edged.
I'm okay with the language. I mean, I appreciate Dr. Thurber's.
Well, and the other part is, I think, I just, put yourself in that situation as administrator, and like your situation at McDonald's. If I'm in a basketball game and all of a sudden I'm going to have to referee two parents because of whatever one believed or didn't believe, where I'd rather just be saying, you know what, we don't want to deal with that here. Just, I think it is part of it too.
Yeah, it does become a fine line at some point where, again, I get it, that this is controversial, or at some point, but somebody's got to make a judgment call. At what point does it go to abusive?
Well,
right? And then at some point, you've got obligations to report the thing.
Right.
I'm not an expert on that, but I think as teachers are, right? And so, I don't know, it feels to me like the right balance, but
I just read it and wanted to bring it, make sure.
Sure.
that it was-
I appreciate that. Yeah, because we talked through, I spent more time on the second one, and so I'm glad you brought that up. And that, in fact, that's where I thought it was.
I mean, yeah, some parents want to come talk to us about why that's, you know, I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not unwilling to listen to the other side of that, but it doesn't feel to me like I want to make a change to it from what I know at this point.
Maybe the best way to look at it, it's the backup, and if a parent was simply doing it with a 6 or 7 year old, that would be a student, and they were in a school function, nobody's gonna pay attention to it, and it's reasonable. If reasonable would
It wouldn't be an issue, but
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the other part too, right? What's the definition of corporal punishment? And to me,
depends who you ask.
yeah,
I
right,
think,
right. And,
you know,
I agree.
when it crosses the line, it would become obvious, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, yeah, because like I said, I'm thinking of the situation at McDonald's, and if that was happening in a school where I was a principal and activity, I think what I'm doing is getting in between the two adults and saying, I don't care what's happened, you just go your separate ways, and let's just.
Well, times have changed, because in that annex building in 8th grade, if you didn't turn your math assignment in with Butch Clark, he had a pal. You got a pal.
They have changed. Yes, sir, they have changed.
I don't know if it's for the improvement in
I
some
know.
ways. I think we live in a society, if you don't spank, we make sure your child's in a car seat, you're a good parent. Too often instead of the details. And I'm not talking about hurting them, but there's gotta be boundaries, so. I'm good with it.
Well, let's take action.
I appreciate that, Randy.
Yes, let's take action on that.
I make a motion that we approve student rights and responsibilities for final adoption.
Okay, moved by Paul Jenkins, second by Gracie Calder. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Policy 8415, child nutrition.
Okay. This is just the policy regarding the changes of the charging language that we've reviewed over last Thursday.
I think we reviewed that
Yes.
in the past with
It's collections.
With Heather.
With Heather, yeah.
I move that we approve the proposed policy 8415.
Second.
Been moved by Ray Calder, second by Paul Jenkins. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Guys, gotta take longer.
Come on, Jason.
That's what he said. That's how it's done.
That's right. Guy, get up there and sit, Jason.
That's right, that's right. We talked about a shirt for a guy. Now, the next policy is our policy 3510, student medication for final adoption. Yeah, we talked about that one. I haven't heard any issues with the policy. I think it's going to be a really good policy. We've had some good changes in there. So.
Can you just summarize that for me, Jason? Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. That's a policy where, just making me old. You've got a bet going on. Yeah, so really what we had is we had some concern from patrons that one of the concerns, for example, was a student that had to put some prescribed lotion on their hands. Well, for the student to be able to put that on their hands, they had to go and get a signature from a doctor to be able to have that at school with them. So there were some things that we were looking at to be able to help with that over-the-counter type things. That a student would be able to, because then what the parent's saying is, even with something that was over the counter, they had to go to a doctor's signature. They're saying, well, I've got to go in and now have a $50 doctor visit to be able to get a signature for a medication that I can buy at the store. And so those are some of the things that we did, is looked at the over-the-counter type and being able to make sure we have a parent's signature, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a doctor's. Now, on prescribed medication, it still has to be a doctor's. So that was one of the big changes. And then also cleaned up some forms.
Okay, have a motion on that.
So moved.
Moved by Ray Calder,
Second.
second by Paul Jenkins. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And,
Summer.
Dr. Wilson Hume, COVID-19.
How long do you want? So,
Just a summary.
yeah, I think we're ready to present the COVID plan. There have been just some minor, almost like editing types of changes from what we discussed last month. We did send it out to our patrons again for feedback. Use Thought Exchange to get feedback.
not a big surprise, and I can show the report if you want, but definitely still very strong sentiment against the mask mandate, which we did not include in the plan. Strong sentiment against vaccine mandates, and so I feel like, and when I discussed that with our principals, that's probably the other key thing, is we did discuss that with principals since we met last, and I'd say I felt a general sense of relief from principals that they didn't have to try to enforce something that was really unenforceable last year. So maybe the other thing just to know is our Education Association asked about paid COVID leave. That wasn't clearly articulated in the plan. We had a discussion with the district leadership team, and because we do have ESSER dollars available, we felt like that was an appropriate use of those ESSER dollars, and we will continue to provide up to 10 days of paid COVID leave for any individual that tests positive, because we are asking them to stay home if they do test positive. And so even if they're feeling well enough to come and teach, we still want them to stay home to try to avoid the transmission of the disease. And so
Haven't they shortened it to 5 days now?
there's no mandatory requirement. We haven't had a mandatory requirement to offer that for the past 2 years.
You know what I mean?
Oh, the 5, sorry, I meant to say 5, sorry, I said 10. We're providing up to 10, we're requiring people to stay home for 5, so.
Well, most people last year was 3 to 5 days. There were some rare exceptions to that.
Yeah. So 10 would be for basically a recurring case that they may get it early in the year, then get contracted again later in the spring type of thing. So 10 days total for the school year, but we are only asking them to stay home for 5. Thank you for that clarification, Randy. So yeah, with that, unless there's other questions from the board, we did send it out to families, and appreciate the feedback from our families and our employees on it. So
Well, you got roughly 450 responses from the patrons.
yeah.
Or did that include teachers?
I thought we were up around 700 different people that responded.
Yeah,
by
it
the
seems
time it
like
was all
it
done,
was
so.
a pretty good response.
Yeah. And again, that was the second iteration. We sent a survey early in June, just asking for some guidelines on where people thought we should be, and we really based our plan on that, so.
How many total days of the 180 were kids required to wear masks? 3 weeks?
It was really October, and then when we hit the second spike in January, we were encouraging but not really enforcing. So as far as like an enforced mandate, it was about 2 to 3 weeks was the most.
15 school days?
Yeah, I think this is a little less, so.
You know, it's pretty good arguments at the time. I wasn't on the board, but I had read American Association of Pediatrics 67 was behind it. I think people are a lot more indifferent than they were a year ago. So
Yeah.
I thought you made a good choice at the time. What we had.
Yeah, I agree.
I felt good about the plan. Are there any questions from board members about the plan?
Any questions? I'll just say I had a couple of informal conversations with, I assume, parents who were also medical professionals who just commented that they were impressed with the plan.
Thanks, Greg. That's helpful.
Carissa, any thoughts from you?
I liked it, so I'm good with it.
Maybe one thing from the survey, and for me it's super helpful, and helpful to the board as well, but it's so easy to pay attention to the super negative comments that are on both sides of the spectrum. But if you really look at where most of the people were, they're very supportive and appreciative of the plan, and recognize that we're trying to find an appropriate balance. So on the extreme ends, people think we're doing too little or too much, and we're dumb either way, but really most of our people are in the middle and really appreciate what we've done, so.
I move we approve the COVID plan.
Second.
Okay, moved by Greg Calder and seconded by Randy Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Did you vote? Was that an aye, Carissa?
Yes,
Okay, thank
yes,
you.
it was I.
Thank you. Motion carries. Planning and personnel, Heath. Oh, John.
Okay, we got 2 property issues to take action on tonight. As requested by the board, we received a second appraisal on the property on 97th North. That appraisal came in at $875,000. There's still a difference, obviously, in the high bid that we received and the appraisal. So really, tonight, you just need to make a decision based on how you want to proceed, based on where that bid is and where.
What was the high bid, John?
$628,000, I believe.
And the first appraisal was?
First appraisal was over $1 million.
Yeah.
So this appraisal, I didn't have a chance to really look at it very carefully, but the appraiser used, I think, I remember 6 comparable
Yes.
sales. 2 of them were 2017 dated sales, but
Correct.
I think he used them because of the location of the sales. But I think his adjustments were proper, and I felt pretty good about that appraisal.
I certainly feel a lot better about it than I did the first one.
That puts it at 35,000, a little over 35,000 an acre.
Correct.
So, the offer is still considerably under the appraisal.
It is. I think there's several factors that you got to weigh as you consider. Clearly, the terms of the bidding process say you can reject any and all bids. And the law allows us to go out and, market the property if that's what you want to do. I think we ought to examine both sides of that coin. One of the things about the bid is it was significantly higher than the next lower bid. So we may find other interested party who are willing to pay closer to the appraised value. That's a risk you may want to take. The other side of that coin is, let's say we don't find that person. Now that the bid that we do have is no longer on the table, and now we're negotiating from scratch.
Is that bid still on the table?
As of today, it is, yes.
What about advantages of listing property?
So, I think we need to decide if we do that, how are we going to employ an agent? Are we going to, try and take advantage of somebody who can get the word spread a little farther and wider than what we typically do, because they've got a marketing machine at their disposal. I will tell you this, with that in mind, I have one of our local realtors send me everything that is comparable property that maybe we could use for school property that comes up. And the listings that I'm seeing for comparable acreages, et cetera, are very comparable to the offer we've received, much more so than the appraisal we've received, is what I'm seeing right now.
So,
Because the high bid's like roughly 25,000 an acre.
25 to 35, yes.
the appraisal's 35,000, right?
Correct.
Right.
35.6.
So you're suggesting that, that's a current appraisal,
It is.
but you're suggesting that the listings that are out there currently are not matching up with the appraisal.
They're not perfect comparables, right? They're just, anywhere from 12 to 30, acres of farm ground that someone's trying to sell, that at the price they're asking, they're not selling as farm ground. They're looking for a developer to purchase that property. And those are. The one thing I think that our appraiser is looking at in evaluating this property is, 2 sides of that property border existing subdivisions. And so, he's viewing the value based on the fact that there appears to be power, sewer, water hookups. Our high bidders here tonight, if he was to get up here to the mic, he would probably tell you that, you know, he's taking a big chance that they're going to approve all those connections and that it's all gonna move forward smoothly, and, you know, he's not gonna lose his shirt on his effort to develop it. And probably any other developer would tell you the same thing, right? We're not developers, we're just a school district trying to get the best value we can out of the property that we have that is in the public's interest. And so, I wanna throw out all the facts that I'm aware of so you can make an appropriate decision.
Do you see our school district needing that in any future window? That's a hard question. I say
Yeah,
15 years.
15 years down the road, given the current property we have, the current growth, I don't see that.
We would be having this discussion within
Right.
our 15-year model,
We
so.
classified this as excess property because it doesn't,
Yeah.
The Kinghorn property was 100 acres, is that what we bought?
80 acres.
80. So we can fit the fourth high school and middle school into 80 acres. So really, with Fairview being just 2 miles to the west and Yukon, what, 1.5 miles to the east, I don't believe it's when the property we need.
My feelings are then, we either accept the bid, or you're gonna sit on it, because putting out bids right now in this market, I think the bids will come back lower. That's my.
I think the bids are what comes right.
Come back lower, the bankers I've talked to, the mortgage lenders are down 50% of people inquiring. They just don't fit with the price and their incomes on what's available in the marketplace.
Don't talk too much, Randy, you're gonna scare this poor guy.
well, my thing is, I mean, we have a responsibility as a patrons to advertise, get the best that we can. I'm still bothered that, I mean, this is a professional appraisal that came in. It's 30% higher than the best bid we received. Who's right, who's wrong, I don't know.
Well, how about the other one? Wasn't it 1.3 million?
The appraisal.
The other appraisal was 1.1.
Well, we found some holes in that appraisal, and that's why we requested a new appraisal. Carissa, what's your thoughts?
I feel it's hard to leave money sitting on the table with an appraisal coming back like that. That property isn't in the hot zone right now that they're not issuing building permits to. It's not hooking onto a certain sewer district. So I feel like the value is gonna stay there and that the demand for it might go up if they don't start issuing more building permits to developers that are currently sitting on land. So I would say put it out on the open market and see what happens.
What's our horizon for putting that money to use for a school, like the bus barn, for example? Like
Yeah.
how soon?
Yeah, I mean, we've been living by with the bus garage, and so, I mean, really, I think ideally within the next year or two, but I don't think there's urgent circumstances that would say we've got to do it right away. The Black Canyon funds from Nick Miller said they can sit there until they're used, and so there's no legal clause that's going to force us to use those.
And we're not, as of tonight, we're not asking for authorization until the earliest March. So-
Right.
So I'm just kind of piggybacking on Chris's comment, and a lot of comments, I guess, that difference between the revised appraisal is still pretty darn significant. And I have not looked at that second appraisal super carefully, and maybe that's.
When it was all public record, I asked someone who is well acquainted with the developments in that area what they thought the properties were worth before I told them what they were. And when I told him the 1.1, he actually chuckled out loud and said, not a chance. And then I told him what the bids were and what it was per acre, and that individual thought that was the one. But I'm good either way. I just don't think we're gonna get higher bids in the next, say, short term, whatever that is.
I would agree with that assessment.
I think that's the issue,
From what I'm
in my
saying.
mind. Is what's the realistic chance that we're gonna get higher than 628 sometime in the next 6 to 12 months? Because we have to assume some reasonable time frame that we're gonna pass upon and get going on these projects. So I could probably be persuaded either way. I don't have a strong opinion, but I don't feel bad about the 628. It seems like, from the little, I'm not an appraiser, but from the little I know, it seems like good.
Cut it loose now and not waiting. You know, you can make an argument either way, and it could go up. Things could turn around quicker than they look.
I don't know many properties that have gone down over
The last 10 years, I think.
The last 2 months, there's been a lot that have gone down. I mean, home prices are going down right now.
That's a little bit of a concern of mine
But
is.
One major home developer out here went from 415 to 375
yeah,
in the last month.
exact same
On
property.
new homes.
But again, is that a 6-week blip and we go back? None of us know. That's definition of the market.
So, Scott, on the table is we either accept or reject this offer, is that what we're discussing?
Correct.
Yeah. And then it's really whether we want to authorize John to do anything with,
All right, just to provide clarity to the conversation, I'm gonna make a motion that we accept the high bid on the 97th North property.
I'll second it.
We have a motion on the table that we accept the high bid on this property, which we understand to be $628,000. That was made by Greg Calder. We have a second by Randy Smith. Is there any further discussion on that motion?
Chairman Dance, maybe
Yes.
just one comment that may be helpful to the board, but I just did a quick comparison on our return on investment. Our total purchase price for that property in 2011 was $189,000. And so that's a return of an annual increase of 20% on that property for that 10 years. For comparison, with the Hit Road property, it's a 25% annual return. So I think we're really close to getting the same return on investment on both of those properties that we're selling. So I think that's just a great investment by the district that they purchased that property, and a great return on investment over the past 10 years with it. So.
Okay, any other comments on that motion? Did we lose Carissa?
I don't think so. Chris, are you still on?
I'm still here. Yep, I'm still here.
I just need to, lost my screen mirroring, so I'll try to get that back on.
Okay, hearing none, we'll take a vote.
Actually, I just wanted to direct a question to Chris if I could.
Okay, yes.
And Chris, I mean this in all sincerity, I don't have a strong opinion, I made the motion, but mostly just have a concrete issue to discuss. Like, do you, and I respect everybody's opinion here, but I'd be interested in your take especially, like, do you, if I were to say to you, do you have a reasonable likelihood, in your opinion, that we're gonna be able to get more than the high bid sometime in the next 6 to 9 months? How would you react to that question?
Let me get my crystal ball.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the hardest thing. I mean, last December I sold 18 acres for $650,000 with no water, with no development possibilities in Blackfoot.
Wow.
And so now we're looking at about the same price for a much bigger parcel that you could develop quite easily.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me to look at that appraisal and leave some money sitting on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a fair comment.
that buyer must have had a specific use for that property, but, I mean, you know, every transaction has its own
Yep.
unique,
Yeah, find the right buyer and
that's what
Where
sets the
someone's
market.
willing to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
well, we do have a motion on the table,
Thank you.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? I'm a nay.
I'm Nate.
So the motion carries 3-2. Property is sold, John.
All right, we will, he's got a big smile on his face, I hope, back here.
I
Anyway,
was worried.
anyway, we'll take the necessary action. I'll work with Ed Nelson to get those documents prepared for that. The second one, we have the documents prepared, and you should have, hopefully, able to access the buyer's agreement for the 12 acres on Hit Road. Just by way of quick reminder, the high bid on that property was $1.5 million, and that is the agreed upon price. And we are, as part of that agreement, I think the other pertinent issues are none of that 1.5 million will go to any kind of brokerage fees or anything of that nature. That will all come to the district, other than we will split the closing costs. The total is just over $8,000 on the closing costs and title policy. So the district will pick up just a little less than $4,000, less than the 1.5 million that's also. But what we need tonight is a motion to approve the sales agreement that was constituted, finalize that sale.
Okay, entertain that motion.
I so move.
Moved by Greg Calder,
Second?
second by Paul Jenkins. All in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries. All right. Woodland Hills Principal recommendation.
Thank you. Just quickly, just to give a quick background, we have an opening at Woodland Hills Elementary School that came earlier this month. We appreciate Scott Dunstrom, who served as the principal there since John Murdoch was deployed in November. We look forward to continuing working with Scott. He's taken a teaching responsibility at Black Canyon Middle School. We opened that position. It's always been nerve-wracking, and this time of year to start looking for a leader of the schools. We opened that position. We had 21 candidates. We screened those candidates and narrowed it down to 11. And from there, we sent a questionnaire out to those 11 candidates and asked them to reply to us. From there, we reviewed the responses and narrowed our interview candidates, or excuse me, our interviews to 8 candidates that we brought in on Monday. On Monday, we set up an interview panel that consisted of teachers and staff from Woodland Hills, myself, Rex Miller, who represented the district, as well as Lane Keller as a principal. And we went through those candidates, identified the top 2 candidates from those interviews, and met with them yesterday, Dr. Wilson, me, myself, Jason, and Guy, to conduct a second interview. And tonight, we're excited to make a recommendation for the principal of Woodland Hills. I'd like to recommend for the principal of Woodland Hills to be Carrie Peterson. Carrie comes to us with a lot of experience. She's been in Bonneville School District for the last 3 years. This is started her 4th year. She's worked as a teacher at Rocky Mountain Middle School, as well as the last 2 years at Iona Elementary School as an instructional coach. What excites me a little bit about this particular hire is she brings more than 20 years of experience to the district from very large school districts outside of the state, coming from Las Vegas, Nashville, Tennessee area, as well as Hawaii. And so she has this great knowledge and experience of things that work in education, but she also has a small taste of what's important in Bonneville School District and what our priorities and focuses are. And she's going to be able to take those 2 things and really step into a great opportunity with Woodland Hills and do really fantastic things and continue the tradition that's been there. So I would like to recommend Carrie Peterson as the principal of Woodland Hills. She's here tonight, so I'll let the board take action and then introduce her. We do appreciate, we found out yesterday after interviews This is now her third trip home from girls' camp this week to take care of business. So we appreciate her willingness to meet with us and make those efforts to be here, so.
Okay, we had an extensive discussion on this during the executive session. So I don't know, are there any other questions from board members on this? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Move that we approve the recommendation for the Woodland Hills principal.
Second. Okay, moved by Greg Calder, second by Paul Jenkins. All in favor? Aye. Was that an aye,
It
Carissa?
was.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, congratulations, Carrie. Is this Carrie? Absolutely. Let's hear from you, Carrie.
Hello, I'm Carrie Peterson. First of all, I just want to say I'm honored for the opportunity to be able to be the principal at Woodland Hills Elementary. Like they said, I've been in education for 23 years and have taught a range from kindergarten through 8th grade, and I just love learning. I'm a lifetime learner myself. I just love diving into it. I love helping others reach their fullest potential, whether it be students, teachers, or just people in the community. I'm excited to get to know the community of Woodland Hills and to be able to hit the ground running. So thank you for it.
I think that it's a great school, and you'll have great students, and I think really good parental support.
I've heard great things about it, so I'm excited to really get to know the community. So thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, next item, Keith.
The next item tonight, we have a request to the school board to make an exception to our policy 5825 nepotism. We had a brief discussion tonight in executive session. I would like to invite Principal Kent Patterson, who's the principal of Sand Creek Middle School, to share with the board his request for this exception.
Come on up, Ken.
All right.
We've seen you.
Yep.
We've heard from you, but
I understand. Chairman Dance, school board members, I'm here to request the school board make an exception to policy 5825 to allow Lisa Patterson to transfer back to Sand Creek Middle School as the health and PE teacher. Lisa taught at Sand Creek Middle School from 2009 to 2021. Last year she transferred to Black Canyon when it opened up in August. In late June of this year, Sand Creek Middle School had an opening for a health and PE teacher. Lisa Patterson applied for that position. We reviewed and interviewed applicants. We felt like Lisa was the most qualified, and thus the request for an exception to policy 5825. We have a plan in place for supervision and evaluations that involve Sand Creek's assistant principal, Patty Suter, and the human resource department at the district office. Thank you for your consideration of this request.
and to be clear, Kent, this is your wife.
That's correct. Yes.
And Mr. Patterson, in executive session, we talked a little bit, but you ended up with only 2 applicants, qualified applicants for the position. Is that
Yes.
correct?
The applicant pool is 4. We screened and narrowed down to 3. One of those withdrew and interviewed 2 of the candidates.
And the other candidate hasn't taught in
It's been a while.
over a decade, if I remember correctly.
How many total applicants was only?
There were 4 applicants total, 3 of which we invited to interview, and one of those withdrew.
I had understood we were not taking action tonight. Did I misunderstand that?
So well, it's up to the board, but the motion is to make an exception to the policy.
This one we are, the release of contract, we're not making
I'm
this
sorry,
action.
I misunderstood. Okay, sorry about that. Okay.
I will express my concerns. I think it would be nice and convenient, but that leaves Black Canyon Middle School, and I know that we've talked about that there are people who are ready to apply for that, but I think that leaves them in a position that is not favorable. as I read through the nepotism policy, and that's board policy, I feel really uncomfortable changing the policy. It's not you, Ken, it's my thought on policy.
So just to clarify, Paul, we're not changing the policy, we're being asked to make an exception
I
to
understand
the
that,
policy.
and I have a problem making exceptions to policies.
Okay, that's clear,
Uh,
thank you.
I just inherently don't like to make change, or exceptions to policies. Particularly when we have something already in place, the people, we're this close to the beginning of the school year, and I think that it's just not the time and place.
Yeah, and I love making exceptions to policy. I'm a lawyer, I spend my whole life making exceptions to policy, but I get it, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, and I'm somewhat kidding. But the policy itself provides a mechanism for exceptions, and I think that's really important. I've been on the board roughly 7 years, and I know we rarely, but have made exceptions in this policy and others. I'm sensitive to the effect on Black Canyon. I think that's an excellent point, and I don't want to lose track of that. At the same time, Sand Creek's, like, if we don't approve this exception, then Sand Creek's got I think the same problem that we're worrying that Black Canyon's gonna have. So I don't know that worrying about one over the other necessarily addresses the ultimate issue very well either. I think the fact that Mrs. Patterson has been there for 11 years and has only been gone for 1 year is a factor in my mind. I don't think it ends the discussion by any means, but it's persuasive to me that that's something that makes it more likely for me to want to approve that exception. I am sensitive to the supervision and addressing complaints issues, but I think we talked about that in some detail. And as long as we have procedures in place where that doesn't put parents in a bad spot, doesn't put Mr. Patterson in a bad spot, and I think, with the assistant principal doing certain things and the HR department of the district doing certain things, I think that feels like a comfortable way to address it. So I'm leaning towards approving the exception, but open to other input and certainly not insensitive to some of Paul's concerns.
By advocating the responsibility to the HR department, and we're all of a sudden taking a well-designed system and scattering it over a large area.
My feelings are, I spent 9 years on planning and zoning in Bonneville County, and Steve Sir had people come and wanting exceptions constantly. And we, this gentleman and I served together on the board, Tom, at times was a board of exception, but we always had to be mindful if we did it, how many people were gonna come and ask Steve Sir for the same exception on their properties. And so I think it's a slippery slope. He's the head power broker at that school, which makes it, to me, you have to be a little more sensitive to that. And I think it's just setting a precedent. You'll have more of these requests if it is made. Even though, as he said, and his most provocative and persuasive argument was that why should Sand Creek be denied an exceptional teacher just because he's the principal? And that is a sound argument. But it's the next situation that comes forward, I think, is hard to defend, and you would have to have such a specific precedent with these exceptions, and then you're starting a list, and the next one you're going to have to justify it. So unless, running for school board, you couldn't run for school board while my wife taught in the district because we had over 1,500 students in our district. That's how far they thought that went. And now we have 13,000. I waited until she retired before I ran for school board. So I think they have a purpose, and it would put you and your wife in a very untenable situation because the fodder would just go on and on over time. It's possible it wouldn't, but down the road, the next situation like that, we gotta be able to defend our position, so I'm leaning to the no.
Chris, any thoughts from you you'd like to share?
Yeah, I feel like it'd be one thing if she wanted to work with Principal Patterson, to work with Principal Patterson. But I feel like because she's worked there for 11 years, and then she tried something else and she didn't quite like it, and so she wants to go back, I don't feel like it's to go back to work with him. I feel like it's to go back to work with those students and with those other coworkers that she has a good rapport, is that the right word, with. So I feel like as long as we have the right hierarchy put in place so that she's not directly reporting to him, I think that it would be fine.
Okay.
Maybe, this is a good thought or not, but I'm gonna put it out there, it's late, so I apologize if it's a bad thought, but the reality is, if this is approved, then the teacher at Black Canyon would be hired on a Category 1 contract more than likely. It's just, I think it's gonna be probably a reality, which means that we'll have to be reviewing that in the spring. It's a 1-year temporary contract period, so the board could authorize this for a year, knowing that if there are significant issues, if it does create complications, then we can say this is only for 1 year, and if there's complications, then she would need to return to that position she had at Black Canyon at the conclusion of the school year, because I guess there's an outside chance that could be an internal transfer. I really believe it's going to be an external hire at Black Canyon that's going to be on a 1-year contract. So that could be a solution, at least to try it for a year and see what the issues are without making a long-term commitment. So I don't know if that's going to be amenable to Mrs. Patterson or to Mr. Patterson, but it is at least maybe one way to evaluate it more fully.
Am I understanding correctly, you're saying that we would commit to revisit it 1 year from now, or we're not
Right.
saying
Right.
what we would do a year from now?
Yeah, I think what we'd say is we're only going to authorize this for this year, and we'll evaluate it in likely March, when we would be likely posting that Category 1 position.
So in other words, we would have to make another exception?
Not necessarily, I mean, if it went well, then we could just continue it, right?
Revoke
Yeah.
the exception, or?
Yeah. Yeah, let it stand.
But
We'd have to revisit it again.
Yeah.
I have to go back to Randy's comment. I understand that wanting the best one to be transferred from another school to your school, and I don't understand why they would have to take second place in the hierarchy that you're describing.
May I speak to that, Paul? Just,
Sure.
I got 2 points. So one, I would say, we try as hard as we can to accommodate teachers' desires. So when teachers want to transfer and the principal wants to hire them, then that's under our voluntary transfer policy. We try to accommodate that. When teachers ask to be released from their contracts after they've signed them, if we can find a suitable replacement, we try to allow that. So we really try to recognize and honor what teachers want, and so because that's what Mrs. Patterson has asked for, is for the transfer. Typically, that's where I would try to support it, unless there's compelling reasons not to. Really, there's some compelling reasons not to in this, and Kent and I have had a lot of discussions about that over the last 2 weeks. And I think the other thing is I've tried to balance those two equations, is when I look at really a viable candidate pool of 2 teachers at Sand Creek, one of which that hasn't taught for over a decade, versus what likely is going to be a 5 to 7 candidate pool at Black Canyon, that looks like it's going to be a decent candidate pool. That balances out for me, because I really don't know where Sand Creek goes from here.
Well, you might that might change
If we repost
if
it,
you repost it,
it could.
you might have some of those.
Yep, it could. Yep.
I know in our earlier meeting, it was expressed that there's no way the person who withdrew knew that Mrs. Patterson applied. I really doubt that. This is a small community. I think she knew that she withdrew, and that is why the policy is in place. And if you start, we'll be dealing with it because they're gonna say you did it once, you gotta do it again. And if somebody wrote the question down on a piece of paper and we knew none of the faces, and they were asking you, what is your opinion on this, we would all say no.
Yeah. I wouldn't. I really wouldn't.
Well, let me put it to you this way. I know in a large corporation, I have a close family member that works. The CEO his son works in this person's department. There's 5 people that are gonna move up. This person, I think she or he will get a fair shake because the CEO's son is running neck to neck with this person. Perceived or real. That's how people think. And so in general, I think it's a good policy having us there for a reason. We're big enough school district. If we were out in Camas or someplace, you have to take them. But we have how many schools do we have in our district? 31 buildings?
No, 25.
25. So I'm advocating not, and I don't know,
Yeah, it's not
can't or his
personal.
wife, it's not personal, it's defending the next case.
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So,
Any other discussion before I call for a motion?
I think I'm right and everybody else is wrong.
I'll go for that.
Chairman Dance,
Yes.
can I make one comment?
Oh, you bet.
So it is going to
Hold,
affect.
just a second.
Sorry.
Right, I guess, am I okay with?
Absolutely, you're the chair. so you-
Great.
Sorry.
Okay, yes.
Sorry. So part of running a school is having people that want to be there. I have no idea why Mrs. Patterson doesn't want to get back in. There's been no communication there. But if someone's really unhappy in my building, I'm not sure that's the person I want. So it's a double-edged sword for me because she is an excellent teacher. But if she really wants to be somewhere else, how effective will she be? So I'm just gonna throw that out.
Sure, appreciate that. Yeah, and I appreciate your viewpoint on it. You're the principal out there. All right, we'll call for a motion. I guess the motion could be either way. So I'll just call for a motion.
I'll move that we approve the request for exception to policy 5825 as it relates to Mrs. Patterson and Sand Creek.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the exception to the policy. In the case
I
of-
second.
And, okay, we got a motion from Greg Calder, and we have a second from Carissa Coates. Any discussion on the motion? Okay.
I've got one quick other comment, and I'll
Okay.
keep it very short. The biggest concern I've heard is that, we're just gonna have tons and tons of requests for exceptions, and I just don't believe that. This cannot have been fun or easy for Mr. Patterson tonight, and nor do I imagine it was easy for Mrs. Patterson. So I just reject the idea that we're gonna have a ton of exceptions. We've made exceptions in the past, but we have not had a groundswell of requests, so I just want to make that clear.
Let me withdraw tons. I'll say 2 in 5 years. This still will be challenging. The next one that comes will be challenging. If it's
Right.
in a reasonable time frame. If it's every 10 years, I don't think it's a big deal. But the bigger you are, we have some in our district now, and I think the less you have.
And I'd love to have some good, tough, challenging issues to wrestle with. That doesn't bother me one bit. That's what we're here for. We'll make the right decision next time, and we'll make the right decision tonight. So I'm okay
Appreciate
with that.
that, Greg. Okay, we have a motion.
Is limited to just this policy. Other policies will come along and they'll say, look, he didn't bully him that much.
Yeah.
So maybe we drop the bullying policy.
Make an exception. kids loyalty policy as it applies to a particular situation. And that's what I want. That's why I'm here. I don't want to be a robot. I want to listen. I want to use my discretion. I want to make a decision. And that's what I signed up for. I'm very happy.
I think I signed up for that same thing.
Yeah.
And
Oddly enough.
I should interject myself, but I'll say, as superintendent, I think I've been very committed to, we're going to follow policy. And if we have to change a policy, then we'll work through the channels we need to change it. I think, we've seen lots of ways we've done that. When we see that there's something wrong with the policy, we try to fix it. The key difference, as we discussed earlier, is this policy specifically permits the board to make exceptions to it, and I think there are times when that's the right decision to make, and I'm glad we have that provision. And we put that provision in because we recognize having a blanket nepotism policy is going to be too prohibitive for the circumstances we have. And now, whether or not this meets that or not, I can't tell you, but I know there's been times we've said we absolutely have to make an exception to this because of this situation, so.
The only reason I would make an exception to this is from, I'm assuming it was Mr. Miller, I can't tell.
It was Mr. Miller.
Yeah. Okay. If he's saying if someone's unhappy in that building, I can understand that. Still has some real heartburn, I'm thinking.
Well, we've been told.
I make decisions all day long. I can move from one scene to another just as fast as you can.
I'm sure you can.
We have okay, go ahead.
This is a filibuster.
If you ask anybody, I am not a hard, fast guy. I don't want to be put in that category. It just, in my workplace, I've seen animosity of two people who have come up in the ranks, are successful, that are now in management positions, and they happen to be married, and it causes conflict in the workplace. So I'm experiencing that firsthand, and if I had all things that could start over again and hiring them, I hired them both, I would probably hire them again, and they'd still move up like that. But I don't know in a government, we're managing the assets of the people in personnel in this case. If it's not too late, Chairman, would you indulge, would this be appropriate to ask these three individuals who might know it, what their opinion is?
I think they've expressed their opinions.
I would just say, for me, I was very reluctant. I think Mr. Patterson realized that. I really had strong hesitation. What made me think about it differently is the fact that Mrs. Patterson voluntarily accepted a transfer to Black Canyon as we were trying to persuade teachers to move to Black Canyon. And so I think, I'm sure there were mixed emotions, I'm sure there was some level of excitement, but I know it was with a lot of reluctance she made that decision. And I personally feel bad that we would penalize her now for stepping up and trying to help us balance the numbers last year. Because if she would have made that decision, we would have had this exact same discussion last spring, because I felt strongly that Mr. Patterson should be the principal at Sand Creek. So one way or the other, we would have had this discussion. And I hate penalizing her now after the fact.
I just was asking you three because you're the ones who are going to have to
Yeah,
get this.
yeah.
Then we're going to have make an exception.
Yeah, and I'll share quickly. When I was appointed principal at Bonneville High School, my mother worked at Bonneville High School for 25 plus years before she retired. And I got a phone call from her and Tears that the district was going to move her. I'm grateful the district reconsidered. They allowed her to work her last few years at Bonneville High School. I had a great experience working with my mother. I didn't supervise her. It did create some awkward situations at times, but it worked very effectively.
Mostly when she tried to supervise Heath.
Yes. High school.
That's amazing.
That's why that statement's in the corporal punishment policy.
I've talked a lot with Kent. I've experienced it firsthand. I understand fully why the policy's there. My situation is different than Kent's right now. I was appreciative that the district stepped back and made an exception at the time to allow my mother to stay at Bonneville High School and finish her career there.
And I would say the conversations that we've all had with Kent have been, it's not easy. It's not easy And I think all of us, and you guys have all made this statement, that when you're a principal or you're in a district office position, everything you do, people analyze and you know, I have brothers that work in education and different places through, it's been, well, we can do this or we can't do this, and it's all based on, because, and I think we all feel comfortable with our relationship, our work with Kent and his wife, if there are concerns, that we can go to them and say, hey, here's a concern, and we've got to hit this head on, what do we do?
I think this is gonna be an interesting vote, because we know how 4 of us feel. Let the chair.
So we have a motion on the table to,
Can I make one comment?
yes, sir, yes, sir.
I'm in a really odd position, because I work for my wife. She owns the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're not at the school.
I know I'm not.
So we have a motion on the table to approve this exception to the nepotism policy, and we have a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
I,
Those opposed to the motion say nay. Nay. There are 3 nays and 2 ayes. The motion dies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Please understand, it's nothing against you or your good wife.
Yep.
Okay, let's see,
Personal leave policy.
personal leave policy.
So you may be aware, with the master agreement that was negotiated this spring with the Bonneville Education Association, we did make some changes to personal leave. And so tonight, this is the first time you're seeing this policy, but because we approved it already in the master agreement, we would like to align policy 5404, personal leave, so that the same expectations are for all of our employees, including classified. So the 2 changes and the alignment to the master agreement is that employees will now receive 5 days of personal leave, when it used to be 3, and it had incentives for them. If they didn't take sick leave, then they got those 2 additional days. With the things that we've done the last several years, we don't want to incentivize people to come to work sick. So again, aligning that to what's in the master agreement. And then underneath number 4, prior to this year's current master agreement, was that there was a policy that prohibited employees from extending vacation time that was already built into the school calendar by taking personal leave, and that was only to be allowed through approval from their supervisor. In negotiations, the BEA presented and we approved their recommendation to change that policy to allow them to extend holiday leave if it's requested at least 20 days in advance. And if it's less than 20 days in advance, it would have to be approved by the principal or supervisor. So the changes here are just aligning this policy to what's already been approved in the master agreement. Yes.
I know in the past, maybe this isn't policy, but I believe it's happened, is a teacher asks for personal leave, and she's on her way out of town, or he, an hour away from town, they get a call, so you have to come back, we can't find a substitute.
So our policy, both in the master agreement and in this, says that personal leave is guaranteed if it's requested 7 days in advance.
Okay, so, and it lets them have options on the holidays.
Yes, this provides them to,
Extend their vacation.
they're leaving
with
town
holiday.
Friday before Thanksgiving, and they can do that. We're asking them to let us know in advance. So the 20 days is guaranteed. It's within 20 days, and they have to get permission from the principal or supervisor.
Does that mean we need to take days off and sign up for substitute teachers?
You know, the reality is, I can't think of very many situations where we didn't work with our teachers and we were able to make this work, or other employees. Very few times can I think of over the last 15 years in the district where an employee requested time off and we weren't able to accommodate that. There's times we send out emails and say, you know, it's state track, state baseball, state softball. We've got 120 subs already in. If you can avoid taking Friday off, we'd really appreciate it. And our employees really work with us on those, but for the most part, we try to do our best to accommodate employees to take the time off if they do.
Any questions or discussion from board members on that policy? Okay, we'll entertain a motion. Moved by Greg Calder to approve that policy. Seconded by Randy. All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion carries. And then I've got on here E, release of contract with employee 2022A.
So we talked in executive session about an employee who we just received a request yesterday to be released from our contract. The recommendation that I would have made, that we talked about in executive session, was to authorize and allow the district to release her from her contract once we find a suitable replacement. So we can have consensus from the board. We can't take action on that tonight. A consensus from the board that you're comfortable the district moving in that direction. We'll work with that employee and place it on a future consent calendar or executive session as needed.
Great, thank you.
So can we consent from the board with us doing that?
We're good with that, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that completes all the items on the agenda. Dr. Wilson, anything else? Anything? So, call for agenda items and upcoming meetings. Given our discussion on the bond issue, the August 31st meeting is probably not necessary.
So it would typically be a work session. So now the question
okay.
is, we moved that from a work session to a special meeting.
You also have the budget.
Oh, yeah,
tax
so,
levy.
yeah, because of the timing with the levy, we want to keep that as a special meeting because the regular meeting is too late. So we need to keep that as a 7 o'clock special meeting if that's still
Okay.
good with the board.
Great.
Yeah. So on that again, we'll be determining the amounts, the board will be determining the amounts to levy for the supplemental levy, for bond payments and for the plan facilities levy. And also be considering whether or not, we'll be presenting whether or not we qualify for emergency levy, and then the board will decide whether to levy that or not.
Any other agenda items from board members?
I would like 3 items to be considered on the next one. Family passes for sports cards. I noticed we spent $683,000 on software. I'd like to know if there's a committee who approves them. I assume there's people who come out selling the software, and I would like to know how those purchases take place. And in the 49 pages of our expenses this month, which was $4.1 million, there are too many big chunks that just say supplies. I think if I was, well, I as a board member would like to know more, and if to see what options we have, and the credit cards. We have tens of thousands of dollars on credit cards. I know they're all justified, but I mean, one of them is, not to pick on Thunder Ridge, but I think there's 25,000 that just says supplies. That's all, that's the whole description. If I'm a patron, I want to see where money is going. They're so generic, and as a board member, I can go and ask him specific checks, and I have a list, I just didn't get over here today. But he always has the right answers for them, but I think that's our job, is to oversee the expenditures. Special services, check 6759 for 750,000. He's gonna answer it in 2 sentences, and it's gonna be fine. But I would like us to know. I don't know if we can bring that up in a discussion.
Comments, Guy?
Yeah, I think that'd be a great discussion. We have several different options right now. The option we're using is just to give the description of the general ledger account, not the description of the purchase.
So you're given the general ledger account number, which we have no idea what that category
yeah,
is.
there's an account number for supplies, and so that's what you're seeing as a description. But I can show you the different options that we have in our software, so I think that'd be a good discussion.
Okay.
And then just find out how the software is purchased, if there's a central team that approves it. See, I mean, you got pharmaceutical salesmen, I'm sure you got software salesmen, and they come out whining and dying, just so that at the end, you know that it's going where you want it to go, I think.
You and I get emails from all kinds of salesmen.
Yeah.
You know, and I delete them because I know they're going to Scott and Guy and Dr. Thurber and all of them. And if it's something that deserves consideration, then administration will consider them and bring them to the board, so.
Yeah, but we can discuss how we work through that process, that's good for the board to know.
Maybe if I could just piggyback a little bit on what you said on that first one. I'm more interested in, what you asked for was fine, I'm not opposed to that, but I'm more interested in what systems and controls we have in place for approvals of those things than I am caring how much we spend on pens versus paper versus.
And the same kind of thought is there an expenditure level that we should have to approve? If it's over $100,000?
We approve all the expenditures in the board meeting because it's on the consent calendar.
But we do pre-approvals for anything over how much, Guy?
So the state statute is anything over 100,000 that's not on a pre-bid contract, then we do bring that to you for approval already. So like the bus bids tonight were on there,
Right.
Yeah.
because that exceeds our ability to approve that without board approval.
How about the software?
Software depends, a lot of those softwares are renewals of prior purchases, so if you're just renewing, you don't have to go through the bid process.
But we would have brought it to the board originally for approval.
And I think one of them on there for this month is Lexia, which is a software we use for our K-3 students. But it's for our 6th year. And one of the things that we do as well is in our survey to our teachers is find out the usage of that. If we're still using that and we feel like it's a benefit to our students, then we continue.
But we'll do a presentation or a discussion of that in a work session. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Did that get to, so I guess what I'm hearing are a report on our controls, our financial controls, a report on our software purchasing procedures, processes, and then the guy will also review options for the board to have better insight into the purchases that are being made. Those three things.
Like Northwest Nazarene was 168,000, is that who we do our credits through?
Professional development, yeah. Yeah.
See, you can say that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then family passes, you wanted for sports activities. A discussion.
See if our
on
district
that.
wants to have a family pass rate. I mean, if your child's playing on the basketball team, you paid all those fees, you get 3 other siblings, every time you go watch your child,
Yeah.
you're paying 22, 24 bucks.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know, who, I guess.
We'll
just leave
work
that
with our
to
high school
our-
admin on that, yeah.
Could we ask the athletic directors to come up with an idea on that?
Yeah, we'll work with our high school principals and ADs to work through
I had a
that.
conversation with Ty, and they're having conversations already about it, so.
Yeah.
we're looking at it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, very good. Anything else relating to future meetings? Okay, we'll call, hearing none, we'll call for a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second by Greg. Greg Calder. Move to adjourn, seconded by Randy.
So
Okay, we stand adjourned. Oh, we got a vote. Aye.
So Chris, where are you?
Now, it's ready. Close call.
I'm in Palm Springs.
Nice. It's still early there. That was a short meeting in Palm Springs.
Great, thank you.